Oops, 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 oops. No. Mouse slips. Almost closed the stream down before it even started. Mouse slips. Hey guys, how you doing today? I'm starting to learn that like I got my window of power here and it's just pouring light in as crazy as possible, which gives me like a backlighting thing. Hey Eric, how you doing? First in, bud. Hey Eric, remember when you said you weren't going to be able to come to the streams anymore? Huh? that life found a way is what had happened, Eric. That I know you're going through some stuff right now, bud, but all it's done is it's just brought us together. It's just brought us together as a people. Famita, good to see you. Good evening, John. I love listening while you draw. That's lovely. The stuff that you're producing is really great, Famita, man. I'm so happy that you're doing that. I'm looking forward to seeing what you're gonna do with that. I sent you some of my music, and I'm looking forward to see what you're gonna do with it. So. I do need to re-record some of that stuff, and I gotta record more of my stuff, but you know how it goes, right? Time slips away from you as you deal with this sort of capitalist enterprise, and the thing that's killing me is getting beautiful out now. It was raining all day, and then all of a sudden it's beautiful. I gotta get out to the beach, man. I gotta go down to the beach. Gotta spend my days on the beach, you know? Forget the traffic, forget the cars, forget any of this kind of stuff, right? I don't know how to cut music for TikTok. Might be a long while I use them. Yeah, I'm the same way with TikTok. Like, I don't know how to do anything on TikTok. I literally just hit like the record button, say some stuff, and then whatever. Like, I'm accepting that I'm just kind of old, and things are like, I'm looking at stuff being like, this is a strange contraption. And you know what really bothers me the most about social media, right? Like, I find that social media, like, the promise of capitalism is always that, like, oh, these guys will do this, and these guys will do this, and these guys will do this, and then, like, the cream will come to the top, and, like, all of this. But near as I can tell, all social media achieves, by having this array of social media, is a division. That we end up divided into, like, our little camps, and, like, there are people who are here, or people who are here, and, like, like, someone can become quite popular on one social media platform. But you'll never hear of them because you're somewhere else. And so we end up getting like really divided and really separated. And more I'm starting to see how that's a strategy by the people who actually own the place to just divide us up into like little categories to make sure that this group never talks to this group and these people never talk to these people, right? I was wondering how come you don't open a waiting room for your stream like other streamers. It would allow us to join the stream and not keep refreshing until it starts. I have no idea how to do that. So I'm gonna make a note of that, Eric. What I'm gonna do, how do I make a waiting room? YouTube. I literally have no idea how to do that. So I'm going to do that at the end of this stream, because you're right, I should have that. Finland's foreign minister, Pekka Haavisto, signed his country's NATO membership. Total disaster. Total disaster. Like, just unnecessary, stupid thing to do, if you ask me. Like, just a dumb thing to do, right? And, hey, Grinning, how you doing? Like, what is happening on the world stage near as I can gather it? So there is reports coming out. I don't want to confirm anything because nothing has been confirmed, but there are reports coming out that there has been a fairly major surrender in Mariupol, that we've had surrenders in Mariupol and we just experienced another one. Numbers as high as 2,000 people who were in like bunkered down and hunkered down in like underground bunkers and things like this. And it was exactly the narrative that I've been saying, right? They ran out of food. Simple as that. They've been in a siege, they've run out of food, right? So this is happening. The idea that like Russia is losing this conflict, Russia's going to get everything it wants, right? That it's seizing this territory. This is the territory it wants. This is where it sent all its troops. It's going to clear people out, and it's going to draw a line, and it's going to say, we have this territory, you don't, right? And it's just whether or not it's going to become internationally recognized. But things like this, where Finland is joining NATO, right? NATO is expanding, right? NATO is growing bigger and getting closer to Russia's border. It's going to make Russia turn around and lean harder on China, on India, on these Middle Eastern countries that don't exactly have the greatest relationship with the United States. this is something that I don't see a lot of commentary on. I don't see a lot of people talking about it, which is that if you like, people talk about Russia as if it's by itself, that it just is Russia and it exists as like this floating, like it might as well be on the moon, right? As far as anyone is concerned. But Russia exists in an international community, and that international community extends beyond what we call the international community. Like when we talk about the international community, we're talking about Europe, Australia, Canada, the United States, and sometimes Mexico, right? That's the international community. So you'll hear like our leaders constantly say, Justin Trudeau says all the time, that there's a consensus among the international community. Well, what they mean is that the white nations agree. Right? So the traditional imperialist nations like Europe, Canada, United States, Australia, they all agree. There's a consensus there, but that doesn't represent, like, that's not even a majority of the population of the earth, right? Like, you've got China, you've got India, you've got huge sections of Africa, right? Like, and Russia is being pushed towards creating stronger ties to China. And honestly, like, one of the things nobody talks about, like everybody talks about Russia as it's like, well, it's in a population decline and now's the moment for these sorts of things and blah, blah, blah. I'm like China looks at Russia as a place for them to flee, right? Like we're because of what we have done with climate change and because that we are ignoring our responsibilities to the earth and to ourselves and to like, that's the best part. All these guys walking around being like, take responsibility, like they're the most irresponsible, reckless people on the planet. Well, the Chinese are looking at this immigration that's going to happen because China's going to get completely fucked over, right? And they're looking at Russia being like, hey, here's these huge swaths of territory, right? We could send huge amounts of Chinese people here, right? And so there's this idea that the two of these guys need to band together, and it is what's going to happen. Like, the truth is that this war is like the international community, the white supremacist nations, versus the rest of the world. That's how it's shaking down. Like that China's Belt and Road Initiative, along with Russia, and if India tips towards China, and if India tips towards this arrangement, which it might, things are going to get really fucky, and things are going to get really weird for the United States. Like, the mass of the people, right, are against this arrangement, right? Like, huge section. Like, China has 1.6 billion people. India has 1.4 billion people. Like, the United States has 400 million people. Like, it doesn't take it doesn't take a genius to sort of figure this shit out. But for so long, we haven't been actually thinking about economics and economies as people. People don't really count, right? Unless you're talking about, like, human stock capital for labor purposes, right? Like, that's how neoliberals talk about human life and human beings. They don't talk about, like, humans as the economy, which is what is the truth. That human beings are your economy. And if human beings are encouraged to do well and are thriving and are pursuing their goals, then your economy is going to be good. But if you're suppressing them and changing them and putting means tests on them and trying to exclude them, then your economy is going to suck, right? Because what neoliberal economics has done is it's convinced everybody that the true economy is this financial sector. It's just this fake, non-existent, if it was gone tomorrow, no one would notice or care, right? And we live in this sort of perpetuating state of fighting against, like, an obvious false idol. Like, if you wanted to use religious ideology or religious terms for it, like, it's as fake as it can be. Like, money's not real. The financial sector is a fake economy. The real economy is coming out of China, and it's coming out of, and it's going to ally itself with Russia and India and all the surrounding nations. It's really what's going to happen, because we are really revealing ourselves in big and serious ways, repeatedly, over and over again, as being just reckless white supremacists. Like, what's going on in Ukraine with the with our funding of like literal overt neo-Nazi groups, like it's just showing the rest of the world that like we're not capable of learning lessons. Like we're not capable of figuring this shit out. That it was bad enough when we were funding like far right extremist groups in the Middle East and Africa and South America, but now we're signaling to the rest of the world that our traditional extremist groups we're willing to empower, right? That the strategy for the ruling class is to, well, let's not empower them directly in our own nation. That's taboo, right? But if we empower them in foreign nations, right, in order to fight wars, and like, what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen, right? So you've armed them, you've trained them, you've given them a lot of money, right? Like, what, you think the neo-Nazis are just going to disappear afterwards, right? And if I'm China, and if I'm Russia, and if I'm India, if I'm these places, I'm looking at this being like, oh shit, like, there's no bottom to the depth. Like, the United States and NATO, there's no bottom to it. They're going to go down as far as they can. And they are not only going to open the door for a Hitler-esque style figure to walk through, they're going to fund him and empower him. Like, that's what's coming out of Ukraine. Is it going to be Zelensky? No, right? It's going to be someone like Zelensky has really set the stage, though. Like, Zelensky banned all of the leftist parties, didn't ban any of the Nazi parties, right? Like, there's literally Nazi parties in Ukraine. They have seats, like they get votes, right? And of course our media is just like hand waving them, just being like, oh, they've only got a seat. It's only 2% of the population. Yeah, right? That's how cancer starts, right? And it doesn't take a lot of cancer to kill you, right? And that's how it grows, that's how it festers, that's where it comes from. And if you ban the competition, if you ban the leftists from organizing and arrest them and torture them the way that Zelensky has, well, then really you're basically saying, well, the only place for the working class to actually put its anger and anxiety and to fight back against a neoliberal death cult is on the far right. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And it just seems to me to be quite apparent. And if I'm China and Russia and all the rest of these places, I'm looking at that being like, yeah, that's what's going to happen. And China's wise in trying to be like, this is a European conflict. We want to lead, like, they don't want this. They want to be as hands off as possible. Like, they don't want to get involved in this, right? But too bad. It's going to happen. Because the United States and these fucking neo-Nazis are going to make it happen. That's who they are, right? That's who they fucking are. Yeah, no, it's people sending commodities and services back to one another. It's trade. Simple as you have to put something in to get something out. I mean, like, but if you don't have people in that equation, right? Like, the neoliberal economists will say, no, it's the commodity and the service that matters, right? That's what we need to focus on. We hyper-focus on commodities and services while absolutely destroying the people. Like, pay them the least we possibly can, enslave them if you have to, right? Absolutely destroy the people, and hyper-focus on the commodity and the service, when the opposite is actually the truth. Because if your people can't afford the commodity and the service, then they won't get access to it, right? Then you can do all the commodities and services you want. Nobody can buy them. Like, the bottom of economics, the foundation of economics is people. It's people first, right? Like, that's Marx's labor theory of value, right? That things are given value by the effort a person puts into it. And if you don't have people, then you don't have an economy, right? And really, really basic shit goes to the wayside when you stop thinking this way. Like, China has 1.6 billion people. That means it's going to have a stronger economy than us. Like, just straight up, like, you don't need other facts or figures or anything, right? A population of 1.6 billion is going to have a stronger, more robust economy, if all things are equal, right? And the United States has had, 50, 60 years of a head start in terms of its development, right? Post-World War II, It was able to really develop its economy and really create something big on the world stage, but they're squandering it completely. Like, they're squandering it completely. And and we are seeing, like, the rise of China. And even if China becomes, like, technologically equivalent, their population is just through the roof. Like, they can overwhelm us pretty easily, and are going to overwhelm us pretty easily. So, we'll see how it all shakes out, of course, as always. The amount Elon Musk just paid for Twitter, $44 billion, is nearly equal to Biden's proposed climate budget, $44.9 billion. In case anyone's wondering how seriously we're taking the climate crisis. Yeah, not seriously at all. Not seriously at all. 1940s Germany on the left, 2020s America. 1. Capitalism. 2. Decay into fascism. 3. Lose to communism. You are here. 2. Decay into fascism. I battled inflation today by harvesting several pounds of spruce tips and starting a container garden in old water bottles. Tomorrow I'll grab the stinging nettle with gloves. That's beautiful, dude. Foraging. We live in like a feudal society now, so we might as well start the foraging up again. Get your garden going if you can. So we've got, despite witnesses and photos, still no RCMP arrests in Coastal GasLink attack. The BC RCMP has assigned 40 investigators to the attack 3 months ago. Nearly 3 months after masked axe-wielding assailants attacked a BC work camp in the dead of night, a team of more than 40 RCMP investigators have yet to announce any leads to the identities, fundings, or methods of those responsible. We're gonna see an upswell of this kind of stuff, right? Like there are people who are closer to the catastrophe than I am, and we are. There are people who are actually witnessing the climate catastrophe and these disasters happen in front of their faces, and they're fighting back. It's very simple. Oh, who's that handsome devil? Here's something that's interesting that's actually occurring. So 4 labor unions have now joined Doug Ford's PC party. It's kind of an odd development, frankly. Like it's like an angel joining the devil. Like it doesn't seem to actually make any sense at all. Hey Watson, how you doing, bud? Like, near as I can tell, what Doug Ford is leaning into is he's leaning into the divide, right? That he's not seeking to ameliorate the divide that has happened in the society. He's leaning into the divide. And he's selectively choosing people to be on the right side. And it seems to me that everyone in Ontario is essentially saying, oh, I believe that I will be on the correct side of this divide, that Doug Ford is 100% creating, right? And he's creating like focal points for everyone to work around, right? Like focal points like the 413 highway, that he's created this big project, which is essentially a make-work project. It's going to destroy a bunch of land. It's going to destroy a huge. It's an environmental disaster, but the people who are going for it are like union workers, people who are looking at it being like, oh, there's a job, right? The jobs crowd, right? Oh, what we need is jobs. When I'm more or less of the opinion, like, no, we should probably think about what we're doing. Like, just saying jobs, like, well, what are you actually gaining? What are you actually doing? And the strategy of capitalism is, of course, to withhold food and shelter, to withhold prosperity from people, right? And so what Doug Ford has done is, when he came into office, he withheld prosperity from huge sections of the populace, right? Huge cuts to education, huge cuts to healthcare, huge cuts to basically everything that benefited poor people at all, right? Huge cuts across the board. Like, I was actually, when Wynne was in government, I was actually thinking about going back to school here in Ontario. Ford came in and just absolutely destroyed that. Like, that's not a reality anymore for someone like me, and for thousands of Ontarians. And Uh, and so Doug Ford's strategy is to withhold prosperity from huge sections of the populace and then selectively allow certain segments of the society to join into the prosperity through this process of job creation, right? That's what it is. And the people who are saying just get a job, essentially what they're saying is buy in to the death cult, right? Buy into the climate change denying psychopaths who are actually working to destroy the society as fast as possible, right? Like, Ford's not attempting to ameliorate and spread the prosperity into the society. He's attempting to withhold prosperity. And why? Because ultimately he understands that getting the people to work for him enriches him. While he does no work whatsoever, right? Like it's not exactly the face of a hardworking man, straight up, and so this is why I think you have some labor unions who are beginning to join Doug Ford, right? Because they see, oh, Doug Ford is actually going to allow us in to the prosperity that he's withholding from everybody else, right? And Ontarians are going to vote for this. Like, this is the shocking part, in my view. Like, I feel like what I'm seeing is, like, do you guys remember the episode of The Simpsons, the monorail episode? Right? Monorail, 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 right? Like, that guy was a pretty clear, obvious huckster, right? Like, an obvious grift perpetuated against an entire town. Like, and that's basically Doug Ford, right? And I feel like I'm watching an entire province just buy in to like an overt grifter. Like, and the thing that kills me the most, I think, about Doug Ford's grift is that it's all based on this idea of like, get a job, work hard, right? Take personal responsibility. Doug Ford has never done any of these things. He was born to a rich business owner, right? Owns sticker factories, and who was an MP in Ontario, and he took his dad's seat. Like, there's no clearer example of just like a hereditary millionaire than someone like Doug Ford. He's literally like a hash dealer, beats his wife. Like, he's just like a low-life thug who everybody is just like, oh yeah, okay, this guy can run the province successfully. And it's a total disaster. And it's a disaster for obvious reasons. Like, cut funding for everything except the cops, right? Just create like a little mafia cartel for yourself. Exclude everybody from it, and convince everybody that the solution to everyone's problems is get a job while we cut all of the jobs, right? It's brutal. All right, what are you guys saying about this? Yeah, pretty much shows how the trade union bureaucracies have degenerated into petty bourgeoisie reactionaries they truly are. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Like, everyone wants to be a capitalist, right? That the solution to poverty is to just become a capitalist. That's the only solution that's being put on the table, right? That, oh, you're complaining because you're working for assholes and and all of this kind of stuff. Well, just become a capitalist. That'll solve the problem, right? And that's essentially what these guys are. And it's a failure from the outset, but they're going to have to put the fork in the light socket. Y'all heard about these people called capitalists? I heard they ain't cash money. I hear they're cringe. Thanks, Cotton. That's the analysis that we need right now, dude. Right there. The just get a job narrative is a colonization of your mindset, a colonization of your thought processes. Yeah, absolutely. And it does have a type of sense. Like, if the society was aligned to actually help people, to actually if the end result was beneficial somehow, it would make a type of sense. But it isn't at all. Like, this is, like, especially Doug Ford's Ontario. Like, Doug Ford cut 700 green energy programs. Like, you want to talk about job destruction. You want to talk, like, we need to transition to a green economy. We need to transition. And there's going to be a lot of jobs that come with this. There's going to be a lot of jobs that move forward in this way, right? If you're pro-job, Doug Ford is your hugest enemy, right? He literally destroyed an entire economy. Like, that's one of the first things he did when he came in. And we're just gullibly going along with it. Because we're too stupid. We're too stupid to figure this shit out. John, have you seen Fairly Odd Parents? I have. Doug Diggadome, the owner of Dimsdale Dimmadome. You bet. One of the classics. Okay, buddy, you're a good boy. Oh, you want to come up and say hi to everybody? Oh, come up and say hi to everybody. Milo says hello. Yes. Yet the solution to poverty is to get on that grind set. Well, and what annoys me the most, I got like direct sun right on my face here. Here we go. What annoys me about that the most is that it's like obviously capitalists would tell people to just work harder, right? Like this is the thing that kills me the most about that narrative. And like obviously people who do know work, who simply own things, right? Because they were born that way, are going to turn around and say to the people who are working for them that the way to succeed in life is to work harder. Right? Because who gets the majority of the benefit of your hard work? It's the people who don't do anything. Like, it's such an obvious con. It's so obviously a grift that's like right in front of your face. And yet everybody's just like, yeah, I guess you just work harder, right? If you work harder and then they'll recognize your work and then everything will be great and you'll get the promotion and all kind of like, it's just fucking not how it works at all. And the only people who seem to think so are the people who do happen to have like the small smattering of actual jobs that actually do pay. But what's frustrating is that it looks to me as though the system is generating, as it's tearing the society into two camps, right, as it's designed to do, it's forcing these people to work incredibly hard just for the basics. Just for like the basic, you want like a house, you want to have like a reasonable security, you want to, well then you've got to work like 60, 80-hour weeks and it's everybody that needs to do it. And if you don't, then you don't get these things. And now even that's failing, right? Now even these people aren't able to get houses and things like this, right? And so because these people are working so hard to maintain like the basic status quo, they feel that everybody should, although everybody can't. Right? It doesn't matter. If I worked 100 hours a week at the jobs that I have available to me, I'll never get a house. Like, I'll never get a house. That's not going to happen. So what's the point? Right? The majority of ministers in Doug's cabinets are also idiots from personally interacting with them. Yeah, like, the issue, near as I can tell, with, like, Doug Ford type people, it does come down very simply that they just don't acknowledge that systems exist. Like, they think that they can just cut $1 billion from education and it's not going to have an impact on the lives of everyday people, right? Like, I'm just astounded. I'm astounded. And at this point, I just don't know, like, I don't know how else to describe this other than, like, it's either that Ontarians are extraordinarily gullible, like they're either extraordinarily gullible or they're duplicitous and evil and are completely fine with just abandoning huge people. And I don't think there's another position to take, right? Like, I think that the people who are voting for Doug Ford, like, your positions are, you gotta either be stupid, right, or evil. And I just don't think you can make a cogent, like, what's the cogent argument? Like, what, and I've never heard one. The cogent argument is just get a job. But it's like, okay, well, that's failed. That doesn't work, obviously. But, like, oh my God, Famita. Famita's taking us off the rails. We're going to Fairly Odd Parents? Where are we at here? Where are we at?
I wish my father was here.
Hello, son! Timmy Turner, my name is Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome. Thank you for locating my long-lost son, Dale Dimmadome, heir to the Dimsdale Dimmadome fortune.
I would love it if Doug Ford was like this. Like, I watched yesterday's debate. I've got it right here. Or I had it right here. Anyway, I watched the debate yesterday, and straight up, dude, like, Doug Ford is stupid. Like, he looks stupid, he appears to be stupid, he sounds stupid. Oh, to the article. Like, why am I reading this, dude? Why am I reading this? Doug Dimmadome is the major business owner in Dimsdale. Dimsdale's a great name, by the way, for a place. Really says a lot. He is sometimes featured as a villain, one time attempting to mind control the citizens of Dimsdale with tainted milk. Although sometimes he does help Timmy Turner. In Channel Chasers, this conflict of character was referenced when Mr. and Mrs. Turner asked him for help finding Timmy. Why am I looking at this, yo? Like, I wish Doug Ford was this classy. Look at this. Look at this guy. He's just like a gold pressed, like, got the big white hat, all this kind of stuff. Like, no, it's like classic hucksterism, right? And like, it's amazing to me that people are not seeing through this clear grift. Like, it's amazing to watch. Like, I gotta write something about it. I gotta put on like a play, right? I gotta do something to because like, it is like that episode of Monorail from The Simpsons, right? And we've seen this story over and over again. Anyway, I'm going around a little circle here. Because it's just like... Anyway. And of course, here's the proof, man. Like, here's the proof you need for it, right? This is as of... Oh, let's do a little refresh. Maybe they've got a new thing. Nope, this is as of today, 7:30 a.m., right? Conservatives are marching on their way to a majority. Like, you need 63 seats to a majority. They've got 74, according to this tracker. And it's just like, how embarrassing. Like, I understand the people who voted for Ford in the first place, right? I understand how they voted for Ford in the first place. That makes sense to me, right? But like, the second he got into office, he betrayed literally everyone and just continued doing that. And now he's going to get another majority? We're very stupid. Like, it's a very stupid thing that we're doing right now. And the people who are voting for him are just dumb. Like, it's dumb. It's so stupid. Yeah, Bezos' mom from Futurama. All of those guys are, right? All of those guys are. Mom is the perfect character. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Futurama Mom. Mom is the owner of Momcore, right? She wears this in public, but she actually looks like this, right? And when she's in public, she's all very much like, oh, dearie, I'm so sweetie, oh my goodness, yeah, right? Like, but then she gets in private, and she's just a shrew. She's just this, like, shrill, she, like, slaps her sons, like, she's really, really evil. And they're all like this. Like, the idea that people like Bill Gates or Bezos or Musk or any of these guys don't have, like, a PR team that are working all the time to create an image of these guys, but it works. Like, we just keep falling for it. So, and there's just no institutional power, no media power certainly, who's attempting to cut through this bullshit and attempting to be like, yeah, okay, that's your PR, but like, what's actually going on? Yeah, read the poll. Who's voting for the useless Liberal Party after 15 years of McGuinty win rule? I mean, Watson, that's just classic Canada. Like, vote Conservative, vote Liberal. Vote Conservative, vote Liberal. Like, it's just how we are. Like, we're not actually interested. And honestly, like, given, like, watching the debate, like, I understand why people don't want to vote for Horvath. She's weak, right? Like, she just comes off as weak. Right? And when you're trying to convince, like, white supremacists to vote for you, like, if you sound like a substitute school teacher, they're probably not going to support you, right? And, like, the thing about Doug is that he comes off, like, he's a dopey idiot, so he comes off like an everyman, right? I'm like really going hard on Ontarians now, dude. Like, it's just like voting Conservative in this election is the worst decision a person can make. Like, easily. Even for the investor class, right? Like, even for people who are hard-nosed, like, far-right capitalists. A vote for Doug Ford right now is the dumbest thing that you can do. There's literally no position where it makes any sense at all. Like, 0%. And this narrative of, like, Wynne ruined Ontario, did she? How? Like, how? Like, I'm not a liberal, and I'm not really in the business of defending liberals, but, like, the McGuinty government dropped emissions in this province by, like, 96%, right? Like, that's not nothing. That's not a zero. Like, that's not the bare bones zero that, like, we usually expect from people like Trudeau or the Conservatives, right? And how did they do it? Well, in order to get it done, they had to make pretty major concessions to the ownership class, right? Because they weren't willing to confront the ownership class completely, that they needed to actually, or they felt they needed to actually work with these people. And so they did it by selling off Hydro One and, like, and giving, like, cushy kind of stuff and all this. But they achieved their goal. The emissions dropped in this province by, like, 94 to 96%. It was huge. It was a massive drop, right? And now the Ford government is going to reverse all of that, right? And, of course, he's going to reverse all of the emission gains while Hydro One is still sold off, while all of that kind of stuff still exists, right? Yeah, the McGuinty Wynne Liberals also cut the corporate tax rate to 11.5%. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I'm not trying to say they're perfect. Like, I'm not trying to say that they were like, oh, we need to go back to the Wynne. No, but, like, I mean, they're still neoliberals, right? Like, they're still neoliberals. And neoliberalism itself is just a failed ideology that's just leading us to enormous collapses. Mom looks like the giant brain characters from the first Star Trek episode. That's funny. I respect George Orwell much more after examining other critics of the Soviet Union. Yeah, Ayn Rand, yeah. Well, and Orwell was a snitch for sure, but one of the Animal Farm, like there's this introduction to Animal Farm that wasn't published with Animal Farm, in which and it's hard to find. It's really tough to find because I think the anti-communists don't want people to read it. Because in it, Orwell says, like, this is somewhat a critique of Soviet society, but it's actually more a critique of our own society. And so this idea that Animal Farm was written explicitly as anti-Soviet propaganda is actually false, according to the author himself, right? That he was actually more concerned about these things happening in his own society, right? And, like, 1984 is the same kind of story, right? Like, he's writing these things not as a critique of Soviet society, but as a concern for his own society, right? Yeah, at least he's not I mean, that's exactly it, right, Mock? Mock's like, I haven't forgotten, at least he isn't Nazi filth like some people. Like, that's how low the bar has gotten now, eh? Well, he's not a Nazi, so... Get rid of that one. Oh yeah, we gotta. Of course, we've got to talk about the Buffalo shooting, right? The Buffalo shooting's pretty straightforward, if you ask me, right? You got a kid who's been spending all his time on 4chan listening to Tucker Carlson. He's concerned about white replacement theory, right? Which he explicitly says. So he goes in and just shoots up a bunch of black people. You know, pretty straightforward. Pretty fucking straightforward shit. Like, oh yeah, but we should let the Nazis have free speech, right? The Nazis should definitely have a say in what goes on in the society. Hydro policy under the Liberals has been run to benefit the Liberals. This is all about making sure their friends are doing well. Yeah, no, but that's every politician, right? Like, and that should be hardly surprising. Like, I've never really understood why there's this kind of aghastment that happens amongst the populace when they're like, a politician did something to benefit their friend? What? I'm like, what? Yeah, like, obviously. Like, I don't get why, like, is it corruption? Yeah, but like it's obviously going to happen. Like I don't know. Like maybe I'm going out on a limb by myself with this one. Maybe I'm just like kind of like I'm the kooky leftist, right, or any of this. But like, of course they are, right? Like the expectation that there's going to be zero corruption amongst the powerful class is something of an absurdism to me. I'm just like, yeah, of course there is. Like, of course they're going to take care of their friends. Of course there's going to be nepotism. Of course they're going to give that contract to their buddies. Of course they're going to give that to their supporters. Like, that's power. Like, that's how it actually works. That's how the whole system operates, right? And if you think that you're going to vote it out and vote for the other guy, well, they're going to do the exact same fucking thing, because that's how it actually works, right? So what you need to get off of this idea that like, oh, they're giving money to their buddies or any of this kind of stuff, and just look at what it is they're achieving and what it is they're doing, right? Because they're always going to give money to their buddies. Like, it's never not going to be the case. And like, you would too, right? Like, this is I say this all the time when I get into this conversation. You would too. Like, don't tell me that if you were the prime minister or the premier, you wouldn't help your friends. Like, of course you would. Of course you would. Like, but what is it that you're helping your friends accomplish, right? Like, if you're helping your friends build a green economy so that we can lower our emissions and create new economic opportunities for the next generation of citizens, right? That's one thing. But if you're helping your friends dismantle that while building a highway that no one's going to use, right? Like, that's a different fucking thing. So it to me, it's like, what are they trying to get done? Like, what is it they're trying to accomplish? That's what matters more. Man, I'm really, really like, I am actually incredibly pissed off that people are voting for it. Like, I'm incredibly pissed off about it. Too early, Famita. Too early. We're doing it at 7. Ugh. I never understood the whole dismiss of intellectual work of people simply because you disagree with their works. Yeah, prime example, George Orwell, Animal Farm in 1984. I mean, but like, we're in this moment in time where like there's no truth anymore. Like, the truth doesn't matter, right? That's what makes this job that I'm doing here so difficult. Well, but also so crucial, I think, right? Which is that there needs to be, in all of this, someone who gives a shit about what's actually happening. Someone who's actually sitting here being like, okay, but what's true? But the truth doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is what people feel. That's all that matters. Like, and the people who are walking around saying the facts don't care about your feelings are the most vulnerable to having their feelings manipulated, right? Like, they're walking around saying, oh, the facts don't care about your feelings, and we got to fight for the truth and freedom and all this kind of stuff. But if you present them with anything resembling the truth, they just call you, like, they just say that you're lazy or a communist. Get a job, right? They don't care. Like, share, subscribe, says Famita. Please share it. Let people know I exist. Let people know I exist. I summoned Yellow Parenti on the Cuban Revolution to express freedom of speech. Also Castro. I liked how Castro expressed his views on certain freedoms. Well, and like, the freedom crowd kills me. Because, like, freedom for what? Freedom to do what? Like, freedom for what? Like, and they don't know how to answer that question, which I find shocking. Like, they're like, freedom! And I was like, okay, freedom for what? Like, this isn't Braveheart, right? You can't just shout freedom and, like, charge the line, right? Like, I predict another major convoy when truckers have to pay $5 per liter. It's already happening. It's already happening. We seem to be looking for Lynch numerical validation. Oh, yeah, very good. No, I'm not going to say that. I also, I want to do the number draw at 7 because I've gone through some of the data, and most people, I get the most amount of people in the chat at 7. That's when most of the people are here. So I want to do the number draw at 7 because that includes the most amount of people. And then also I get to play a song for the most amount of people, right? That's kind of how it works. I get good numbers at the beginning, so you can all kind of hear me rant about what I'm thinking for the day, and then we do the number draw, and then I read some articles, and that's usually when things drop off. Most people drop off at that point. Ugh. More than half of young Canadians see racist content online. What? A white supremacist society also puts its white supremacy online? I'm shocked. I'm shocked, I say. So this is actually an article that I wanted to read aloud, and I think I am going to save it for just a moment, because we're just about to do the number draw, but then I'll read this one. So look forward to this. Canada and the Banderites. This is an article written by Terry Mason, right? For 80 years, Banderite immigrants have been embedded to the Liberal Party of Canada to the point of occupying the number 2 position of Justin Trudeau's current government. So we're seeing more and more and more commentary that's creating closer and closer and closer links to the far-right Nazi collaborator Banderites, right? And people are starting to notice it. I came to realize that when people talk about freedom, they mean 2 things. Freedom, doing anything without consequences. The freedom for capitalists to sell and buy goods. Yeah, that seems to be what it is, right? But they don't think about it that way, right? Like they when they hear the word freedom, it just creates in their mind this idea of like freedom to not wear a mask, right? Like their conception of freedom is so reduced to like explicitly their own personal experience, right? Like so if we start talking about freedom as like, well, we should be free from a wage slave system, like we should be free from a system that withholds food and shelter to enslave us, then it's communism, right? Then it's too much. But if it's the freedom for a capitalist to enslave people through a wage slave system, then that's good. But there's a holiness to that, right? I don't exist. I'm a being of pure thought, and this universe is an illusion. Seraphim, don't start this shit. Although you've got a good name for that idea, I gotta tell you. Because a seraphim is a type of angel, isn't it? Seraphim. Come on. Of course, they're like immediately seraphim. Definition. Come on. Oh, but yours is spelt with a Y. Makes it totally different. Yeah, an order of angels. Okay. So it's not only just that you are one angel, you are an entire order of angels. A seraphim of angels. I love it. I love it. Really embrace it. Average home price. I love this, man. I love how they're reporting on this. Average Canadian house prices slide to $746,000. Sales plummet amid rising rates. Sales fell across 80% of local markets. Oh my God, it's plummeting, guys. The whole thing is crashing. Finally, it's happening. Homeowners are sitting there being like, oh boy, I'll finally be able to get a house. Here's the graph. Here's the fucking graph, right? Goes up here, goes down to here, right? Still higher than the peak back in March, right? Still higher. Plummeting, crashing, oh, it's coming down. Like, no, it's not. Like, no, it's fucking not. Right? Like, this idea that this line is suddenly going to go, like, it's genuinely not going to happen that way. Like, if it does, I'm wrong. Right? If it does, then I'll be like, okay, my bad. I've been wrong before. Right? I've been wrong before. What's the one thing that I was super wrong about that everybody brings back to me and shows me clips of? Is I didn't think that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. I literally didn't think it was going to happen, right? And I said so. I didn't think it was going to happen, and the reason why I said it is because I thought that the United States would just come negotiate at the table. It would have been so easy to solve the problem. Like, literally walk over, go, oh, you guys are serious about this. Oh, okay, then we won't keep funding neo-Nazis. Like, literally. It would have been so easy to prevent, but we just aren't doing it. And lesson learned from my perspective, right? Don't give the United States any credibility at all. Like, that was the fatal flaw there, is that I gave the United States, like, rudimentary basic credibility, and my bad. And it could happen here too. Like, I could be wrong. Like, we're changing into a feudal society. There's literally no reason for billionaires and millionaires to sell these properties. They want the land, right? Like, that I think is the piece of the puzzle that I'm not seeing articulated, right? Like, what happens when the people who own the property are actually not interested in selling, right? Like, they keep reporting on, like, oh, total sales are down, right? Like, the less people are actually buying the less people are actually buying the properties, right? You can see that here, unit sales Canada unadjusted, right? That's the yellow line you're seeing here, right? Oh, overall sales are down. It's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, these guys aren't interested in selling. They want the land. Like, that's what they're getting. And I just don't know why that's not coming into the narrative. And I think a big reason why that's not coming into the narrative is because it is fundamentally a concession that the whole idea of a housing market is illegitimate in the first place, right? Like, there's no legitimacy to this. There's no legitimacy to the market. There's no legitimacy at all. Like, what's the legitimacy? We're withholding housing from people, right? Good, hardworking Canadians. We're withholding housing. Why? So that some millionaires and some billionaires can store their money there, right? That's it. It's as stupid as it gets. But I mean, we're re-electing Doug Ford, so we're very stupid people. And you're starting to see the Liberal party and the Liberal apparatus, of which the Globe and Mail is part, come out against Pierre Poilievre in very serious ways, right? Like, this is a pretty serious article, actually, to come out against Pierre Poilievre before he's even won the leadership, right? The danger Pierre Poilievre's corrosive campaign poses to Canada. It's tempting to write off the verbal threats and scenes of nasty intimidation federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was subjected to recently as the work of a handful of yobs we needn't be too worried about. We should all avoid the allure of that notion. What's happened to Mr. Singh while visiting the Peterborough, Ontario campaign headquarters of an NDP candidate in the Ontario election should never be accepted or normalized. It should be condemned in the fiercest terms possible by every person in this country, especially politicians who might be contributing to these incidents of public rage. You mean like Justin Trudeau scapegoating immigrants over the housing crisis? Is that what you're talking about? Oh no, okay. If you haven't seen the video of the incident, you should take a minute to find it. After walking out of the campaign office, Mr. Singh is instantly surrounded by men and women, all screaming horrible, vile things in his face. The premise of their anger appears to be the deal he signed with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to support the Liberals until 2025. Among other things, he's called a traitor. Mr. Singh did not have any security. He is fortunate to have escaped the sanctuary of a waiting automobile before things became violent. I mean, that's kind of an aspersion, right? Like the assumption that things would become violent if he had have stayed. The protesters were very much of the same ilk of those who pelted Mr. Trudeau with rocks at the campaign stop during the last federal election. They boasted about being Freedom Convoy folks whose corrosive anger is fueled by half-baked conspiracy. Like, this is how detached and clueless liberals are. Imagine being a conservative and hearing this, right? The protesters were very much of the same ilk of those who pelted Mr. Trudeau with rocks at a campaign stop during the last federal election. They boasted about being Freedom Convoy folks whose corrosive anger is fueled by half-baked conspiracy theories and the heated, discordant rhetoric of people like Federal Conservative Party of Canada leadership candidate Pierre Poilievre. Like, if I hear that line and I'm like a conservative or like a conservative-leaning person, I'm going to vote Pierre. Like, I'm going to vote Pierre. Like, this is the way you're talking about this? Like, talk about divisive, right? Like, that we're the ones being accused of being divisive, and yet this is what's being written in the Globe and Mail. Like, Mr. Singh issued a statement on Friday in which he absolved the people of Peterborough for what happened, but issued a caution. While disagreements are fundamental to a thriving democracy, hatred, violence, and wishing death upon others threaten it. Politicians must remember the consequences when they stoke fear and division. He could have been speaking directly to Mr. Poilievre. The Ottawa area MP didn't organize the protests in Peterborough, but his campaign to become Tory leader has legitimized the anger that was on display there. in many ways, it's also his anger, and it reflects the contempt he holds for the Prime Minister. He has given these people reason to believe Mr. Trudeau is one of the most despicable people in this country. I mean, Mr. Trudeau is one of the most despicable people in the country. Like, there's more of sort of the cluelessness, right? Like, sorry, dude. Like, did you not kind of cotton on when he came out in blackface in front of all of us? Did you not kind of figure it out when he started, like, blaming immigrants for the housing problem? Have you not figured out that Trudeau doesn't give a fuck about us when he, like, put up a basic income and then dismantled it in front of all of us? Like, literally his last budget celebrated the fact that it was trickle-down economics. Like, this guy's a total fucking loser. Like, a total fucking just haircut loser. He's done this by running one of the most dishonest, contemptible political campaigns ever seen in Canada. Every day he seems to find a new low. Accusing the Prime Minister of sinister things that the so-called Freedom Convoy folks lap up like mindless fools. Like what? Like using the Emergencies Act for the first time in Canadian history? Like, probably the most fascistic act that has occurred in the nation's history. Not the nation's history. There's been more serious stuff. But, like, within the last 30 years, like, literally using the Emergencies Act against a bunch of people blocking a bridge. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, are you kidding me? Last week, he told the would-be supporters that Mr. Trudeau was spying on them everywhere. He said the government had been following them to the pharmacy, to family visits, even on their runs to the beer store. Stop the surveillance state, he tweeted. He does not seem to care about the damage that such ludicrous statements cause, or about the future crisis he would be causing in this country with his burn-the-house-down approach to politics. Oof. Is the man so bankrupt of cogent, viable policies that this is what he has to resort to? Consequences be damned. I gotta tell you, this is, like, really making me like Pierre. Like, straight up. Like, his burn-the-house-down approach to politics? Hey, what do you think I'm doing? Like, this is how detached liberals have become. That they don't actually understand that that's exactly what people want. That what is happening in this country is there is a rising sentiment amongst the populace that this system is fundamentally not working. And that energy is being funneled down various different avenues. One of the avenues that it's being funneled down is in the Conservative Party, and it's the libertarian movement, right? The idea that all of this, like, liberal globalist shit and all of this needs to go away. And of course, the logical conclusion is that we just sell everything to corporations and then that'll work out, right? Which, of course, that's kind of a failure. But that the rising sentiment amongst leftism and the swing towards socialism and communism is also happening on the right. And so when you write this kind of shit, right, saying, like, is burn down the house approach to politics, you're not helping the liberal cause. You're not actually looking and asking yourself as a liberal, what are we doing wrong here? Like, what is happening that these forces are beginning to gain power? You're just doing the same thing that Hillary Clinton did when she called half the nation deplorables, right? You just lose a whole bunch of support doing it, right? Like, this is the fucking Globe and Mail. Like, it's not like a fucking YouTube guy like me, right? Like, this is like a major statement to make that's going to chase people into the conservative camp. Does he not see that his warm embrace of the protesters in Ottawa, the ones who shut down the city for 3 weeks and cost the economy tens of millions of dollars, has done? He's given license to what we saw play out in Peterborough. The people mimicking Mr. Poilievre's blatant call for freedom. Yeah, he's seen what he's done. He's galvanizing support. Like, he's being a politician. Like, what the fuck? Conservative leadership candidate Jean Charest denounced the Peterborough protesters and called on Mr. Poilievre to do the same. However, Mr. Poilievre's social media feed remains silent on what took place. Like, bringing up Jean Charest, like, this is so obviously, like, a liberal ploy. Like, Jean Charest's a liberal. And they've put him in the leadership camp, like, and he's not even, like, a second tier. And yet he gets a mention? Like, it's so embarrassing. Like, the liberals are trying so fucking hard to convince everybody that that their way is correct, that they're willing to, like, infect conservative politics with this and insist that this is the only reasonable choice. It's just, like, clumsy and ham-handed and stupid. And, like, conservatives see through it. Like, they look at Jean Charest, and they look at the media, like, jerking Jean Charest off, and they're just like, a bit much, don't you think? Anyway. Okay, story time. So my dad disowned me last weekend. What the fuck? And part of his disownment was trying to scare me about starving. When you starve, and I know you will, that's super gross. Like, that's super gross, dude. I'm so sorry that's happening to you, bud. Like, that's the conservative mindset. Like, abandon even your own children, right? I'm sorry that's happening to you, dude. That's brutal. The ruling class wants it to go down Skippy's path. I mean, who's Skippy there? Is Skippy Trudeau? Like, the ruling class wants to work with Trudeau because Trudeau's doing what they say. That's it. Like, Trudeau's doing what they say. Very, very straightforwardly. Oh, yeah, dude. I think Pierre will actually, like, beat the shit out of Trudeau. Like, I actually think that this next election that's going to happen here in Canada is going to be a landslide victory for the Conservatives. I don't think it's going to be close. Like, I really don't think it's going to be close. Ligandies has got it right. Let's pull the number. Adam, you're here right in time. We're doing the number draw. Let me pull it up. I always forget to prep it. David Lynch. All right, there's 14 people watching right now, according to this. I expect 14 numbers. I'm on with a 7. Me and Mocked, ride or die.
Here we go for today's number.
Bunch of 8s.
It's May 17, 2022.
Here we go. Got 3, we got 8, 4, 5.
Each ball has a number.
Adam.
Numbers 1 through 10.
That's hilarious, dude. Okay, here we go.
Numbers.
This is going to be good. Feeling like there's a good array. Good array of numbers. Here we go. 7.
Pick a number.
7. Amanda in with the last minute. 7.
Number is...
Oh, you
8.
Oh, the worst way to lose, dude. The worst way to lose. But we got Oddity, NDM, pulling it off with an 8. May the energy of David Lynch take you out into the world. All right, and as promised, someone in chat put a 1 or a 2. Someone in chat put a 1 or a 2. First one wins. Oh, Ligandies had an 8. That's right. Ligandies kicked this whole thing off. No, 3 is half of 8. Get it right, guys. 3 of half is 8. Mocked in with the 1. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So that means that we are playing this song. Oh, okay, cool. You gotta get ahead of the human race, and we're the lazy ones working at the end of your nukes and your guns, and we don't even care. Bring on the doom, light up this apocalypse, we'll be going soon. God let his chosen ones wander forever in the burning sun, and 10 times worse the fate for us. Forget him, worship the dust, 'cause we don't even care. Bring on the doom, line up this apocalypse, we'll be going soon. Baptize us with rising tides, never let us see what hides inside, and cover our sins with dollar signs. The fire will burn away our pride, and you could have done anything at all. You could have done anything at all. You could have done anything at all, and you chose this. Oh, we don't even care. Bring on the doom. Line up this apocalypse. We'll be going soon. 'Cause we don't even care. Yeah, bring on the doom. Line up this apocalypse, we'll be going soon, cause we don't even care. Bring on the doom, light up this apocalypse, we'll be going soon. That's a cathartic piece, that one. That's a cathartic piece. Right? Just like, there does come a moment where you can't carry the burdens of this around, you know? Like, you can't carry the burden of the fate of civilization and the fate of all this shit around with you wherever you go. You know, you do gotta, like, try to shrug it off, and you do gotta try to, like, live your own fucking life and enjoy the world around you, right? Like, it can't constantly be this catastrophe. Even though it fucking is. Even though it fucking totally is. Alright. So, guys, I hate to do this to you. I need to go use the washroom, and I have nothing planned to show you while I do that. So, chair stream. Majority of people here, chair stream. 1 second, guys, 1 second. Ugh. I can't believe the chair just said that. The chair. The most controversial moment on the show is when the chair gets the mic. Chair. You shouldn't have said that. That's terrible. That's terrible. Okay. Canada and the Banderites. For 80 years, Banderite immigrants have been embedded in the Liberal Party of Canada to the point of occupying the number 2 position in Justin Trudeau's current government. The first foreign fighters to arrive in Ukraine at the start of the war in February 2022 were Canadians. The first foreign officer arrested by Russian forces on May 3rd was a Canadian general. Clearly, Canada, although located more than 6,000 kilometers from Ukraine, has a hidden involvement in this conflict. In this article, I will show that all Canadian Liberal governments have supported the Ukrainian Banderites since the beginning of the Second World War. They had it both ways during that war, fighting the Nazis, but supporting the Banderites. Worse still, the current Canadian government is composed of Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, flanked by a Banderite deputy, Chrystia Freeland. While the CIA's connections to the Nazis during the Cold War were not revealed until 1975, with the Pike, Church, and Rockefeller congressional commissions, and only ended with President Jimmy Carter, the Canadian Liberal Party's ties to the Nazis continue. Canada is the only country in the world outside of Ukraine to have a Banderite minister, and what's more, she is the number 2 in its government. In 1940, when the United Kingdom was at war but the United States was not, the Canadian Liberal government of William King created the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress to help anti-Bolshevik immigrants against the pro-Soviet Association of United Ukrainian Canadians and the Canadian Jewish Congress. Pro-Soviet libraries and synagogues were banned. The Liberal Party of the Kingdom of Canada was not created to promote individualism against conservative ideas, but against the Republican idea. During the Second World War, Prime Minister William King was well liked by his fellow citizens, but he was booed by his soldiers when he visited them in Europe. The Liberal Party always held anti-Russian positions, presenting them as an anti-Soviet until 1991, and always interpreted Christianity as opposed to Judaism. Also, at the end of the Second World War, Canada was the main refuge for Banderites, 35,000 immigrants, and Baltic Nazis. Among them were Volodymyr Kubijovek and Michael Chomayak, whose real name was Mikhailo Chomayak, the editors of the main Nazi newspaper in Central Europe, I can never pronounce this, guys. It's terrible. Krakivsky Visti. You'd think by now, I've only read the word like 58 times. Chromaik, who worked under the direct control of the Nazi Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, never denied his collaborationist past. On the contrary, he was always a militant member of the OUN. It is in this spirit that he raised his granddaughter, Chrystia Freeland, the current Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. Far from condemning the crimes of the Banderites, she began her career as a journalist at the age of 18, working for Kujovic's Encyclopedia of Ukraine, now available on the internet. Then she worked for the Ukrainian News, the newspaper of the Canadian Banderites, and the Ukrainian Weekly, the newspaper of the U.S. Banderites linked to the ABN and the CIA. She traveled to the Soviet Union at the end of its days. The Soviet authorities questioned the Canadian government for its support of the Banderites and forbade her to return. However, after the dissolution of the USSR, she became the Moscow bureau chief of the Financial Times. Then she became deputy editor of the Globe and Mail and editor-in-chief of Thomas Reuters Digital. In her articles, as well as in her books, Sale of the Century, Russia's Wild Ride from Communism to Capitalism, and Plutocrats, The Rise of the New Global Super-Rich and the Fall of Everyone Else, Chrystia Freeland develops two theses, I think that's what that word is, dear to her grandfather. She criticizes the ultra-rich by choosing almost exclusively Jewish examples. She denounces at every turn the USSR and then Russia. It should be remembered that fascism was a response to the economic crisis of 1929, proposing a nationalist class alliance by corporation. The Nazis and Banderites added a terrible racial dimension. By targeting the super-rich, Chrystia Freeland rightly addresses the main problem of today. Today, only finance is profitable while production is in crisis. However, she insidiously drifts towards a racial reading by noting that Jews are more numerous among the super-rich than in the population, and by suggesting that this correlation is significant. In 1991, Polish-Ukrainian Liberal MP Boris Wyszynski intervened to make Canada the first country in the world to recognize Ukrainian independence. With his family fortune, Future Bakery, he created a service to distribute news from Ukraine to every member of parliament. He financed the archiving of Vladimir Kuzhibovic and Michael Chomaik of documents on Ukrainian nationalists during the Second World War. It must be admitted that the Encyclopedia of Ukraine is not a scientific work, but a rehabilitation of the Banderites and a falsification of history. Using his family ties, Boris introduced the future Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko to Canada. In 1994, Liberal Prime Minister Jean Chrétien negotiated a treaty of friendship and cooperation with Ukraine, and in 1996, he asked for NATO membership of that country. In January 2004, Canada, under Liberal Prime Minister Paul Martin, participated in Washington's plan of the Orange Revolution. The Canadian ambassador in Kiev, Andrew Robinson, organized meetings among his colleagues from 28 countries to bring Viktor Yushchenko to power. The aim was to break the policy of President Kuchma, who had accepted Russian gas instead of favoring the U.S. search for oil in the Caspian Sea. The Canadian ambassador financed the survey of the Alexander Razumkov Ukrainian Center for Economic and Political Studies, according to which the presidential election was rigged, and he also provided $30,000 to the PORA, It Is Time, association of NATO strategist Gene Sharp. On the basis of the Razumkov poll alone, PORA organized demonstrations, the election was cancelled, and another one was called. Canada spent $3 million to send 500 election observers. The second election brought Viktor Yushchenko to power. Yushchenko put together his team, choosing Vladislav Kasiv, George Soros' employer and leader of PORA, and his special advisor, and Anatoly Gritsenko, U.S.-trained military officer and president of the Razumkov Center, as Minister of Defense. Liberal MP Boris Wyszynski was particularly active during the Orange Revolution. His sister, Ruslana, being very close to Mrs. Yushchenko, Katerina Chomoshenko, he invested 250,000 Canadian dollars to support the movement and used his apartment in Kiev city center to coordinate the demonstrations between the two elections. Pora processions chanted Canada and flew the maple leaf flag. Chrystia Freeland began her political career in 2013 with the Liberal Party. She was elected Member of Parliament for Toronto. In 2014, she supported the Revolution of Dignity in Kiev, i.e. the Banderites' coup, and met its main leaders. She denounced the independence of Crimea and met Mustafa Dzhemiliev, the famous U.S. spy during the Cold War and leader of the Tatars. Eventually, Russian President Vladimir Putin banned her from entering Russia. She was appointed Minister of Foreign Trade of Canada by Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in 2015, then Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2017, and Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs in 2019, which is equivalent to Deputy Prime Minister. She became Minister of Finance in 2020. In 2014, Conservative Foreign Minister John Baird visited Maiden Square and met with the main leaders of the protest. Canadian television considered that he was thus giving support to President Putin's version that this revolution is only a Western manipulation. The Canadian Embassy spokeswoman, Inna Sarkova, was one of the leaders of the Euromaidan movement. The embassy, located next to Maidan Square, was a refuge for the protesters who camped in its hall for a week. The neo-Nazi group, C-14, took refuge there on February 18, 2014, during the massacre. When Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was shot down over Ukraine on July 17, 2014, the Montreal-based International Civil Aviation Organization sent 4 inspectors to the crash site. Even before the investigation began, Chrystia Freeland began an international campaign to denounce Russia. She would later use her ministerial status to throw as much fuel to the fire as possible. After the overthrow of President Viktor Yanukovych and the rise to power of the Banderites, Canada created Operation Unifier, Canadian Armed Forces Joint Task Force Ukraine. The aim was to train the Ukrainian military and develop their military police. The operation was conducted under the orders of London and Washington. It included sending 200 instructors and non-lethal equipment. It ended on February 13, 2022, just days before the Russian operation, so as not to place Canada in a war situation. In 8 years, Canada has given nearly $900 million in aid to Ukraine. From left to right, Ukrainian ambassador to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. In the foreground, the mythical CIA spy during the Cold War and leader of the anti-Russian Tatars. In 2016, Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau received Mustafa Dzhemiliev, whom his deputy Chrystia Freeland had already met. He had become, in August 2015, the emir of an international Muslim brigade, co-financed by Ukraine and Turkey, to retake Crimea. At the same time, Chrystia Freeland negotiated the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Here's Chrystia Freeland posing with the Banderite symbol during one of the protests, right? The Banderite slogan, "Glory to Ukraine." In 2017, when the website Russia Insider revealed the criminal past of her grandfather and his still close ties with the Banderites, she denied the facts and denounced Russian propaganda. However, on February 27th, she appeared with a group of OUNB Banderites at a demonstration against Russian aggression. The photo, which she posted herself, was quickly removed from her Twitter account. Reacting with its NATO partners to the Russian military operation, Canada has modified its budget to set aside $500 million for the Ukrainian army, including the Banderites. It has already sent machine guns, pistols, rifles, 1.5 million rounds of ammunition, sniper rifles, and various related equipment, night vision goggles, helmets and body armor, 100 Carl Gustav M2 recoilless rifles, and 2,000 rounds of 84mm ammunition, 390,000 individual field rations, and approximately 1,600 flak jackets, 1,400 M72 rocket launchers, and 7,500 hand grenades. as well as a subscription to commercial satellite imagery for $1 million, cameras for surveillance drones, M777 howitzers and related ammunition, as well as additional ammunition for the Carl Gustav M2 anti-armor weapon, 8 commercial model armored vehicles, and a service contract for the maintenance and repair of specialized drone-carrying cameras, and began training Ukrainian soldiers in the handling of M777 howitzers. On March 2nd, Justin Trudeau, who trusts the United States, had some 20 countries sign a declaration denouncing Russian disinformation. The aim is to prevent the dissemination of information about Ukrainian and Canadian Banderites. On March 10th, Canada managed to get some 30 countries to sign a second, very Orwellian declaration welcoming, in the name of press freedom, the censorship in the west of Russia Today and Sputnik, 2 Russian public media organizations. Since the Banderites regime came to power in Kiev in 2014, Canada has sanctioned more than 900 Russian and Ukrainian opposition figures and companies. It has added to this list people close to the Russian president and members of their families. In spite of its declarations of principle in favor of the equality and right of all men, Canada supports without reserve the Banderites, heralds of the racial superiority of the Ukrainians over the Russians. Another good one. Right? Like, and I like that they're called, this paper calls them the Banderites, because I think that's actually more accurate, right? I've been calling them Nazis, because that's what they are, but Banderites is closer to the mark, right? Because that's sort of the focal point, the funneling of all things. And also, I think there is some general confusion in the populace, because there are lots of people who don't call themselves Nazis, but when you look at what they are, they're Banderites, right? They support a Nazi collaborator. So this ongoing war, and again, I always bring this up. Why is this narrative so difficult for Westerners to believe, right? That America and NATO went into a nation, funded far-right extremists to coup the government, right? Like, sounds familiar, doesn't it? Like, sounds like something they've done over and over and over again. And yet, for whatever reason, when it comes to Ukraine, no, couldn't possibly be the case, even though it's what they've always done over and over and over and over and over again, right? Yeah, chair Slavic Ukrainian. You got me, buddy. That book by Freeland, Plutocrats, is nauseating. She claims in it that the 1% of the 1% are getting all the gains, and that wealth is not trickling down to the lower reaches of the 1%. Yeah, but that's true. Like, it is actually the case that, like, we say the 1%, but there is, like, a 1% within that 1% that has, like, an overwhelming amount of the wealth. Right? How about Banderite Nazis? Yeah. This, I mean, Freeland is becoming more and more of, and it's happening in exactly the way I expect it, right? That, like, these figures, these vicious figures, are not coming to power as, like, disgusting, sniveling, like, grotesque figures. Like, they're kind of banal. Like, when you actually listen to Chrystia Freeland and when you see her on the day-to-day, she's just kind of like a banal, she's like a middle-aged woman, right? Like, she doesn't come off like Umbridge. She doesn't come off like these kind of demonic figures through history, right? That it's the banality of everything that I think is what's so troublesome and so worrisome. And it reminds me of this book, The Banality of Evil, that I read in university. And there were these researchers who went through and spoke with all of the former Nazis and all of the like the Germans post World War II, many of them incarcerated, right? And their whole question that they wanted asked was, like, how did this happen? Like, what was the driving force behind this Holocaust and what occurred, right? And their findings was that most people were not actually, like, overwhelmingly anti-Jewish Like, they might be anti-Semitic, but they weren't sitting there being like, yeah, let's round them up and all that kind of stuff, right? Most of them weren't like that. Most of them didn't have these sorts of views. That, in fact, the reason why they were doing what they were doing was very simply that this is what the structure rewarded. That, oh, I want the promotion. I want a better job. I want to do this. I want to do that. I need to support my family. So the system asks me to do this. And quite contrary to the narrative, like, they had expected a narrative of, like, the Nazis will shoot you if you don't want to participate. But that's not what was happening. If you didn't want to participate in, like, if you didn't want to be a clerk, right, punching in the data for the Holocaust, if you thought that that was abhorrent or whatever, then they would just remove you. And they would just be like, oh, okay, so you'll go over here and live out your days as, like, private or corporal or whatever. But if you want to be promoted, right, this is the position for that. And so people would do it. And it's very banal reason, right? Like, when we think of these guys, we tend to think of, like, Hitler when he was raving, right? Like this raving madman Hitler. But most people were just like, no, I got a raise. I went into that position, I got a raise. So why shouldn't I do it? Right? Yep. Adolf Eichmann looked like an unassuming accountant. He formulated the final solution. Yeah. And a lot of these guys were like that, right? Just like clear-minded, very straightforward, like, yeah, and the final solution is to just get rid of the Jews, right? Obviously. Isn't that right? Yeah, yep. And, like, yeah, most fascist dictators are generally unimpressive outside of bombastic speeches. Well, I mean, because at bottom, right, at bottom, they're incredibly stupid and uncreative, right? Like, that's really what it is. Like the solutions they come up with are dumb, are not rooted in reality, that don't really help anybody, are incredibly destructive, and juvenile, right? Like, that's the far right in a teacup. Like, that's they're dangerous, without a doubt, but, like, it's such a, and weak, yeah, and weak, and just dumb, just like. What's more pathetic than saying the solution to all of our problems is to attack a vulnerable group? Like, it's so sad and weak and dumb and self-destructive. Like, and what's scary about this moment in American history is that, like, America is essentially a country that did exactly that, right? It wiped out the First Nations people. It attacked. Oh, I know, buddy. I know. Whoop, 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 whoop. Guest appearance, Milo. Isn't that nice, buddy? Isn't that nice? I know. We're speaking of very hard and difficult things, but you're a dog. You don't understand any of that. You're just a little dog. You're just a little dog with a stupid little face. That we messed up, didn't we just? Okay. And, like, what's so scary about this moment is that America has never had to actually face any serious repercussions for this. That they moved forward on a policy of genocide and it worked. It worked completely, right? And that, oh yeah, I mean, the fascistic turn of the Republican Party, it's gonna be wild, man. Like, it's gonna be this, like, it's, I don't even know what to think about any of this anymore, right? Like, it just doesn't seem, like, the truth doesn't seem to matter anymore to anyone. That, like, and what's odd, though, is that, like, the Republican Party today would actually be, like, against this Ukrainian war, right? That's what's so wild. Like, we describe them as fascistic, but simultaneously, like, Trump is literally walking around saying we should do diplomacy and end this war. Like, that's what's so wild about the Republicans right now, that they're overt, like, they're on the international stage, they want to stop these wars, right? But domestically, they're fascist. It's wild. It's wild. Oh yeah, the liberal class is complicit in this, of course. Dries Riphagen? If you say so, bud. If you say so. Like, get ready for this guy, by the way. Like, this guy's the next Prime Minister of Canada for sure. In sooner than you think. Oh yeah, dude. Dems are taking a huge slacking this November. The polls are showing it. Like, Biden is down huge. The Democrats are down. Like, and they should be. Like, they should be. Like, these guys have the votes to push any legislative agenda they want. They do. They have the votes to do it. And they're just not. This moment in American history should reveal to everyone that there is no such thing as an electoral option out of this, right? It just doesn't exist in the United States. That you literally have a choice between like these kooky cultists on the right, or like these obvious corporate stooges on the left, and it's like, and if there's no opportunity to actually raise like, people keep saying like, oh, we should vote for a third party. It's like, that's not going to happen. That the system is structured specifically to destroy it. Some people, especially the Reich Commissariat of the Netherlands, made a profession of trying to find and report Jews to the Nazis. Ugh, gross. Dries Riphagen was the most infamous of them. Gross. Like, it's weird, man. Like, it's weird. It's weird that we're seeing, like, this upsurgence of Nazism again. Like, it's weird. Like, didn't we figure this out? Isn't, like, never again? Isn't that, like, a whole thing? Like, it just seems like don't work with Nazis seems pretty basic. And also, like, I'm just staggered by how, like, why do we care this much about, like, why are we so insistent that the only way to negotiate with the world is through violence? Why are we so insistent that the only way to get things done on the world stage is through military force and through invasion, right? Like, it's such a fucking waste of time and effort and energy. Like, it's just the opposite of helpful, right? It's just the opposite of helpful, and I don't get it. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, whatever. And of course, amidst all of this, like, I can't imagine why the Democrats are being completely shellacked. Canceling student debt would be very unfair and favor those who make lots of money in their lifetime, former Fed Chair Bernanke says. Like, they're outright saying, here, it would be very fair to eliminate Ben Bernanke, who served as in the Fed from 2016 to 14, told the New York Times. Many of the people who have large amounts of student debt are professionals who are going to go on and make lots of money in their lifetime. So why would we be favoring them over someone who didn't go to college, for example? Like, stupid brain is stupid, is what it really comes down to. Like, if your belief is that all you got to do is give money to rich people and your society is going to be better, then you can say the stupidest shit you like, and people are supposed to take you seriously, right? Advocates for student loan forgiveness, though, remain adamant that canceling student debt will stimulate the economy. Of course it would, right? Because instead of shoving money into a black hole, right, which is the bank accounts of these worthless investors who hoard their money offshore, right, they'll actually have money to spend where? In their local fucking economy, right? It doesn't take a fucking genius to figure this shit out. The problem is that we've just been grifted by losers like this for so long that we're willing to accept whatever we're told by total idiots and boobs. Like, people like Doug Ford can stand up and say what they like, and we'll be like, yeah, that's right. If you take money away from rich people, then they won't be able to invest it into business. And that'll mean less jobs, right? Like, it's just the dumbest possible position that you can take. Like, as if they're not just jamming it offshore in the first place. Oh yeah, I stumbled across this one, and I thought that this was actually an interesting one. And interesting for us, I think, all to kind of understand a little bit more. And it really clarified a lot of things about how I feel about any organization or any group that's trying to form ranks, right? If you see this kind of behavior, start getting suspicious of these people, right? Simple Sabotage Field Manual. How to destroy your organizations. The purpose of this paper is to characterize simple sabotage, to outline its possible effects, and to present suggestions for inciting and executing it. History of the Simple Sabotage Field Manual. Before the CIA, there was the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. Formed in 1942 in order to shore up American intelligence capabilities at the request of Franklin D. Roosevelt, before the end of World War II, the OSS eventually employed 24,000 people and had operations across Europe and Asia. Amongst its responsibilities was frustrating the German war effort, and, to that end, it wrote a short set of best practices, the Simple Sabotage Field Manual. The purpose of the manual is fairly straightforward. It is to characterize simple sabotage, to outline its possible effects, and to present suggestions for inciting and executing it. Sabotage varies from highly technical coup de main acts that require detailed planning and the use of specially trained operatives, to innumerable simple acts which the ordinary individual citizen saboteur can perform. This paper is primarily concerned with the latter type. Simple sabotage requires no destructive tools whatsoever, and produces physical damage, if any, by highly indirect means. It is based on universal opportunities to make faulty decisions, to adopt a non-cooperative attitude, and to induce others to follow suit. Making a faulty decision may be simply a matter of placing tools in one spot instead of another. A non-cooperative attitude may involve nothing more than creating an unpleasant situation among one's fellow workers, engaging in bickerings, or displaying surliness and stupidity. This type of activity, sometimes referred to as the human element, is frequently responsible for accidents, delays, and general obstruction even under normal conditions. The potential saboteur should discover what types of faulty decisions and cooperation are normally found in this kind of work, and should then devise his sabotage so as to enlarge that margin for error. The manual, published in 1944, has now been declassified, but it was once used as a reference guide for OSS operatives globally to train individuals in German-occupied territories how to best become citizen saboteurs. It says that purposeful stupidity is contrary to human nature, and thus the manual means to serve as inspiration and direction for saboteurs. In short, the best way that ordinary citizens unhappy with the German occupation could aid the Allied military was to drive inefficiency in their workplaces, to slow down every attempt at progress and make even the simplest tasks frustrating. Specific examples involved mechanics not repairing engines on time, misplacing tools so that they are hard to find, or misusing tools so as to break them more frequently. Bus drivers could accidentally go past the bus stop where German officers would most likely be found or want to get off. Train operators could issue the wrong tickets to travelers so they end up at the wrong destination. Or they could issue 2 tickets for the same seat to cause delays. Janitors could issue a disorderly workplace environment by keeping things dirty, or placing rice in water cooling systems. Even those without jobs could get involved by giving wrong directions when asked, changing signposts to point the wrong way, or pretending to not speak whatever language the other person is using. How to sabotage your team most effectively. This all got me thinking about Charlie Munger, and how he has said it is often easier to solve problems backwards than it is to solve them forwards. Try to uncover the things that would most effectively prevent you from achieving your goals, and just don't do those things. Avoid what is certain to bring about failure, so that you give yourself the best shot at success. In order to achieve our goals or to make progress generally, many times we rely on working with others. Often, this collaboration happens in the workplace. And this is where the OSS focused their expertise. How might we best destroy the ability of our organizations to make efficient and meaningful progress? So, with Charlie Munger's guidance in mind, what can we learn from the OSS's Simple Sabotage Field Manual? What do the experts say is the best way to sabotage the organizations in which we work? Think about how many of these things are standard where you work. Does it feel like CIA operatives have been sabotaging your current workplace for decades? Or that you might unwittingly have started to help their efforts? If so, can you do anything about it? Simple steps to ensure organization dysfunction. It's probably easiest to ensure progress will not be made if you are the owner or leader of an entire organization. In this position, you can cause great distress and destroy morale if you insist on doing everything through channels. Never permit shortcuts to be taken in order to expedite decisions. Make speeches. Talk as frequently as possible and at great length. Illustrate your points by long anecdotes and accounts of personal experiences. Never hesitate to make a few appropriate patriotic comments. When possible, refer all matters to committees for further study and consideration. Attempt to make the committees as large as possible, never less than 5. Bring up irrelevant issues as frequently as possible. Haggle over precise wordings of communications, minutes, resolutions. Refer back to matters decided upon at the last meeting and attempt to reopen the question of the inadvisability of that decision. Advocate caution. Be reasonable and urge your fellow conferees to be reasonable and avoid haste, which might result in embarrassments or difficulties later on. Be worried about the propriety of any decision. Raise the question of whether such action as is contemplated lies within the jurisdiction of the group, or whether it might conflict with the policy of some higher echelon. However, do not despair if you are not yet the leader of an entire organization, as managers of smaller teams can also do their part to bring down a group of people otherwise motivated to do well. It would be best if you can insist on perfect work in relatively unimportant products. When training new workers, give incomplete or misleading instructions. Give lengthy and incomprehensible explanations when questioned. To lower morale, and with it, production, be pleasant to inefficient workers. Give them undeserved promotions. Discriminate against efficient workers. Complain unjustly about their work. Hold conferences when there is more critical work to be done. Don't order new working materials until your current stocks have been virtually exhausted, so that the slightest delay in filling your order will mean a shutdown. In making work assignments, always sign out the unimportant jobs first. See that the important jobs are assigned to inefficient workers of poor machines. Last but not least, if you are more of an employee looking to frustrate the well-intentioned efforts of those around you, it is best that you work slowly, spread rumors, do your work poorly, and blame it on the bad tools, machinery, or equipment. Complain that these things are preventing you from doing your job right. Contrive as many interruptions to your work as you can. When you go to the lavatory, spend longer time there than is necessary. Never pass on your skill and experience to a new or less skillful worker. Be as irritable and quarrelsome as possible without getting yourself into trouble. And here we have it. Some of the easiest ways to prevent a group of people from efficiently and effectively working together. If you are like me, many of these things sound surprisingly familiar. A manual written in 1944 seems to suggest that the best way to break down organizations is to utilize behaviors that organizations today treat as best practices. The next time you see these things causing trouble, maybe it makes sense to call them out. Explain how things might be done differently to improve your chance of success by avoiding the things sure to cause failures. If you get any pushback, send around this manual. Maybe knowing that the US military's best suggestions for citizens to help it win a war was to destroy an enemy's organizational efficiency will cause some pause. The military suggested the same practices you have been using to attempt the opposite. This may at least prompt a discussion about how we might improve our processes today. Of course, the conclusion of this article is that we need to improve our processes and be aware and all this kind of stuff. And the whole time I was reading it, I was like, no, we should be doing this. We should be doing this. This is the stuff that we should be doing in all of our workplaces right now. I don't see any reason to participate or cooperate with any enterprise right now. And being as much of a pain in the ass to the most amount of people to grind this thing down in big and serious ways seems to be the only thing to do. Like, I don't understand why anyone would participate in this system willfully. Like, that's the thing I think that like, I talk to people, and I think it's natural for people to want to do their job well, to want to do, like, the best they possibly can in their workplace, and we should stop that. Like, we should stop that. Like, the system is designed to collapse and fail in big and serious ways. right? Like are we going to be happy with how things are going when the famines overtake us? I'm not. From a working class perspective, watch the documentary The Wobblies on what sabotage can mean. It isn't destroying the means of your employment or income, by the way. It is the willful withholding of efficiency. That's right. Making things as inefficient as possible. And we should do it. We should 100% do it. But kind of look at my job and think like, I don't think there's anything I could do to actually make it more inefficient. I literally stand there and take orders. That's what I do. Oh well. I guess I could just become a chatty Cathy, slow the line down, right? 64% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Either over half the country is lazy, or neoliberals are full of shit. Pick one. I pick full of shit. It's like the entire thesis of this channel. Yeah. This is from Workers Today. Billions for weapons as the planet burns. 2 important reports were released last month, neither getting the kind of attention they deserve. On April 4th, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's Working Groups 3 report was published, evoking a strong reaction from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The report, he said, is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloging the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. At COP26, the developed countries pledged to spend a modest $100 billion for the Adaptation Fund to assist developing countries adapt to climate change. Meanwhile, on April 25th, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute issued its annual report, finding that the world's military spending for the first time surpassed the $2 trillion mark. The 5 largest spenders, the United States, China, India, and the United Kingdom and Russia, accounted for 62% of this amount. The United States by itself accounts for 40% of total arms expenditure. There is an endless flow of money for weapons, but less than a pittance to avert planetary disaster. That word, disaster, is not an exaggeration. The UN Secretary General Guterres has warned that we are on a fast track to climate disaster. It is time to stop burning our planet. These words are based on the facts contained in the Working Group 3 report. It is now firmly established in the scientific record that the historical responsibility for the devastation done to our environment and our climate rests with the most powerful states, led by the United States. There is little debate about this responsibility in the distant past, a consequence of the ruthless war against nature carried out by the forces of capitalism colonialism. But this responsibility also extends to the present period. On April 1st, a study published in the Lancet Planetary Health demonstrated that from 1970 to 2017, high-income nations are responsible for 74% of global excess material use, driven primarily by the USA. And the EU, 28 high-income countries. The excess material used in the North Atlantic countries is due to the use of abiotic resources, fossil fuels, metals, and non-metallic materials. China is responsible for 15% of global excess material use, and the rest of the global south is responsible for only 8%. The excess use of these lower income countries is driven largely by using biotic resources, biomass. This distinction between abiotic and biotic resources shows us that the excess resource use from the global south is largely renewable, whereas that of the North Atlantic states is non-renewable. This should have been on the front page of the newspapers of the world, particularly in the global south, and its finding debated widely on television channels, but it was barely remarked upon. It proves decisively that the high-income countries of the North Atlantic are destroying the planet, that they need to change their ways, and that they need to pay into the various adaptation and mitigation funds to assist countries that are not creating the problem, but that are suffering from its impact. Having presented the data, the scholars who wrote this paper note that high-income nations bear the overwhelming responsibility for global ecological breakdown, and therefore owe an ecological debt to the rest of the world. These nations need to take the lead in making radical reductions in their resource use to avoid further degradation, which will likely require transformative, post-growth, and degrowth approaches. These are interesting thoughts. Radical reductions in resource use, and then post-growth and degrowth approaches. The North Atlantic states, led by the United States, are the largest spenders of social wealth on arms. The Pentagon, the U.S. Armed Forces, remains the single largest consumers of oil, says a Brown University study, and as a result, one of the world's top greenhouse gas emitters. To get the United States and its allies to sign the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, the UN member states had to allow greenhouse gas emissions by the military to be excluded from the national reporting on emissions. The vulgarity of these matters can be put plainly by comparison of two money values. First, in 2019, the United Nations calculated that the annual funding gap to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals amounted to $2.5 trillion. Turning over the annual $2 trillion in global military expenditure to the SDGs would go a long way toward dealing with the major assaults on human dignity: hunger, illiteracy, houselessness, lack of medical care, and so on. It is important to note here that the $2 trillion figure from the SIPRI does not include the lifetime waste of social wealth given to private arms manufacturers for weapons systems. For example, the Lockheed Martin F-35 weapon system is projected to cost nearly $2 trillion. In 2021, the world spent over $2 trillion on war, but only invested, and this is a generous calculation, $750 billion in clean energy and energy efficiency. Total investment in energy infrastructure in 2021 was $1.9 trillion, but the bulk of that investment went to fossil fuels: oil, natural gas, and coal. So, investments in fossil fuels continue, and investments in arms rise, while investments to transition to new forms of cleaner energy remain insufficient. On April 28th, U.S. President Joe Biden asked the U.S. Congress to provide $33 billion for weapon systems to be sent to Ukraine. The call for these funds comes alongside incendiary statements made by the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who said that the U.S. is not trying to remove Russian forces from Ukraine, but to see Russia weakened. Austin's comment should not come as a surprise. It mirrors U.S. policy since 2018, which has been to prevent China and Russia from becoming near-peer rivals. Human rights are not the concern. The focus is preventing any challenge to U.S. hegemony. For that reason, social wealth is wasted on weapons and not used to address the dilemmas of humanity. Consider the way the United States has reacted to a deal between Solomon Islands and China, two neighbors. Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavere said that this deal sought to promote trade and humanitarian cooperation, not the militarization of the Pacific Ocean. On the day of Prime Minister Sogavere's address, a high-level U.S. delegation arrived in the nation's capital, Honiara. They told Prime Minister Sogavere that if the Chinese established any kind of military installation, the United States would then have significant concerns and respond accordingly. These were plain threats. A few days later, Chinese Foreign Minister spokesperson Wang Wenbin said, "Island countries in the South Pacific are independent and sovereign states, not a backyard of the U.S. or Australia. Their attempt to revive the Monroe Doctrine in the South Pacific region will get no support and lead to nowhere." Solomon Islands has a long memory of the history of Australian-British colonialism and the scars of the atom bomb tests. The practice of blackbirding abducted thousands of Solomon Islanders to work the sugarcane fields in Queensland, Australia in the 19th century, eventually leading to the Quayo Rebellion of 1927 in Malerta. Solomon Islands has fought hard against being militarized, voting in 2016 with the world to prohibit nuclear weapons. The appetite to be the backyard of the United States or Australia is not there. That was clear from the luminous poem Peace Signs by Solomon Islands writer Celestine Kulagor. A mushroom sprouts from an arid Pacific atoll. I'm messing it all up. Starting again. A mushroom sprouts from an arid Pacific atoll, disintegrates into space, leaving only a residue of might, to which, for an illusory peace and security, man clings. In the calm of the early morning, the third day after, love found joy in the empty tomb, the wooden cross of disgrace, transformed into a symbol of love, service, peace. In the heat of the afternoon lull, the UN flag flutters, hidden from sight by national banners, under which sit men with clenched fists, signing peace treaties. Like, what is it? What is it that is driving the whites to this? Like, let's be real clear about what's happening, right? Like, it's pretty clear, right? It's the whites. Like, who are the people who are funding war? Who are the people who are going crazy with this shit? These guys, and these guys, right? It's the whites. Like, what's up? What's up with the whites? Why can't we get our shit together on this? Like, why isn't climate change considered a national security issue? Like, where are the generals? Where are the lieutenants? Where are the majors? Where are the naval commanders? Where are the people in military command standing up and actually saying out loud, climate change is a national security issue, right? Where are they? The reality is that because they're not saying it, we get to say that this is a country of dunders. We're just a country of complete, thick, moronic idiots, incapable of understanding even the most basic shit. Like, that's what's so funny about living in North America right now, is that everybody's walking around thinking like that they're smart. Everybody's walking around pretending like the people they're listening to, like the people who listen to Jordan Peterson. Right? They think this guy's smart when he's probably the stupidest person in the room. Like, stupider than they are by large amounts. And what's shocking to me is that there's no military voice. There's no military command. There's no one actually standing up within the halls of our own military saying out loud over and over again, this is a national security issue. And it is a national security issue. Like, you think when towns burn down, that the people who are having their towns burned down don't think it's a national security issue, right? Like, this is the scale of our abandonment. The scale of our abandonment is so vast and so huge that even the people who are in positions to ensure our national security are incapable of responding to it. And there just comes a point where you need to ask yourself, why? Why is it the case that our leadership is incapable of responding to it? Because now, like, the profit motive isn't enough any longer for me. It's no longer enough to save but money, right? Because even the thickest, stupidest person can understand, oh, if I have all of this money and then I burn to the ground and die, that is bad, right? And there just must be a deeper arrogance and a deeper hubris, right? Yes, I saw all about this with Jordan Peterson, right? Like, he's not attracted to large women, said so, and yeah, so he left Twitter, deprive us. Yeah, sorry, I'll actually read the comment. Speaking of Jordan Peterson, he's not attracted to large women and said so on Twitter. So Dr. Incel left Twitter today and deprived us of his lunacy. Yeah, like, I mean, look, guys, I think it's time for us to really, like, stop trying to engage with Peterson in a serious way and start simply saying, yeah, like, Peterson has schizophrenia that he denies. Like, he's been diagnosed with schizophrenia and he denies that that's the case. So, like, you're dealing with a schizophrenic who actually believes that the Bible is literally true, right? He's a Christian fundamentalist. He has said things out loud. Well, because the thing about Peterson is that he's still taken seriously. Like, he actually, like, he interviews people like Pierre Poilievre. Like, Pierre Poilievre goes on his show, right? Like, he's got this big fan base. But, like, the guy, like, the guy has fundamental issues. Like, foundational issues. Like, he's a Christian fundamentalist, first of all, right? Like, that's a pretty big fucking issue, right? And, like, you can't be a Christian fundamentalist and be intellect. Like, I used to be a Christian fundamentalist. You're not capable of, like, you're intellectually corrupted. You can't actually make intellectual decisions accurately if you're a Christian fundamentalist, because at the base of your foundational belief is this idea that I have a book that's magic, and it's the foundation of all truth, as Peterson says. Like, what's scary about someone like Peterson is that people do take him seriously. That's what's scary about him, right? Even though it keeps coming out, like, more and more as time goes forward, it's just like when he began to come out on the world stage, right? It was just like mask on, smiley face. But more and more as time goes forward, that mask is just coming off and off and off, right? And it seems to just make him more popular. Like, that's the scary part about him, is that the more people know about how reprehensible his views are and how much of like a terrifying figure he actually is, the more that gets revealed, the more people seem to like him. Like, that's what's scary to me about Peterson. Like, and this Twitter situation is actually kind of case in point. Like, here's the entire story. Sports Illustrated releases 4 photos, right? They release 4 photos of Sports, like, Illustrated 4 covers, swim suit 2022. Right? They release 4 photos. It's, like, completely non-controversial in my view. That, yeah, here they are. Right? They release these 4 photos. Here, can I open image? And these are 4 different, and, like, okay, so one of them is literally Kim Kardashian, right? Makes sense, very popular, right? The other one, I don't know who this is, but just, like, standard beautiful woman, right? Then they've got an older woman, right? And then they've got a larger woman, right? And these are your 4 pictures that you're given. These are 4 alternative covers for the Sports Illustrated thing, okay? Like, I can accept the idea that you would look at any of these women and just be like, oh, I don't find that attractive for myself. That's fine, right? But for Jordan Peterson, this is an affront. This is the woke crowd trying to jam down our throats. I don't know what. Like, trying to jam down our throats an authoritarian viewpoint of what beauty standards are or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And, like, maybe Sports Illustrated is making a comment where they're saying, hey, you know, there are many different ways to be beautiful, and there are many different ways of being out there in the world, and there are different versions of what this means. And there, like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? This kind of classic statement. And so why shouldn't we put these images of beauty forward? And if somebody picks up the magazine and looks at it and goes, not my cup of tea, maybe they'll pick up another one and be like, there you go, that's what we're talking about. And who's to say what and what's to say who, right? But the idea that Peterson looks at this and feels the need to go on Twitter and say, how dare Sports Illustrated put a larger woman in front of me, how disgusting, right? He's just revealing that he is fundamentally a misogynist, right? That's it. That all women are for, in Jordan Peterson's worldview, are for him to get a boner over, right? And if he's presented with a woman that doesn't give him a boner, then that's an affront to his worldview, and it's a disgraceful kind of absolutely thing, right? Like, it's a total, like, at what point do we just start saying this guy's a total fucking joke? That he's not, like, he's not interacting with the world in a way that makes any fucking sense at all. And, like, the Peterson simps, man, they kill me. They kill me, dude. So what's he into? Lollies? I'm not even gonna go there. They probably got to be wearing the SS uniform. That's probably what he's into. I assume he feels someone from Sports Illustrated was going to knock on his door and make him say this woman is attractive, or he gets sent to the Antifa gulag. But that's always what he's done, right? Like, once you understand that, like, Peterson rises to prominence and fame on a lie. Like, once you understand that he lied about the nature of the bill that he was confronting, right? He lied, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. Right? It was a lie. And once you understand that, like, you don't need to listen to this guy anymore. But many people do. People still do. It's astounding to me. Oh, yes. Here's a great article. The Disastrous Legacy of the New Democrats. Clintonites taught their party how to talk about helping people without actually doing it. I actually really like this article because it really does set the foundation. It shows you, like, if you're sitting there asking yourself, how did we get here? This article does a good job of setting the stage. Ben Burgess's YouTube channel goes in on his idiocy all the time. Like, I can't do it. I can't do it, man. Like, when I first encountered Jordan Peterson, I actually found him to be quite helpful. Like, I've been upfront about this before, and I'll continue being upfront about it. Like, he's a rural Manitoba man with a religious background, right? And I'm a rural Manitoba man with a religious background, right? Like, fundamentally, the way I encountered him, which was 12 Rules for Life, I found it to be kind of kick in the pants, right at a time when I needed a kick in the pants, like right at the right time. And I found it to be kind of inoffensive. I knew when I was reading it that I was kind of reading like an unpackaging or a repackaging rather of The Secret. Like it's not really a secret that it's sort of The Secret, but it's just repackaged for young men, right? But just something about the way he was speaking with the bravado and the brusqueness that he talks, I appreciated it, right? And it was just like a straight shooting, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that there's fundamentally anything wrong with that. And if that's all he ever was, and if that's all he was trying to do, I think that'd be fine, right? Like if Peterson stood up and said, look, the society that we're in is kind of messed up all the time, don't you think? Like, sure, there's hardships, and sure, there's difficulty, and yeah, maybe the structure of the thing is kind of wild, and maybe you should do something about it, but you know what else you should be doing? You should be trying to get your room cleaned up. You should be trying to straighten out your own life and standing up straight on your own 2 feet and getting things done to confront the nonsense of the world that's around you. You know, if that's how he talked, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay. That's fine, but that's not what he does, right? That's not what he does. That Peterson fundamentally believes that the hierarchy that we exist in is self-justifying. And people who stand up against the hierarchy and say of the hierarchy that it hasn't justified itself are like cultural Marxists or postmodernists or whatever, which he misunderstands in the first place. Like, he doesn't actually understand the subject, right? Like, that's the fundamental linchpin of why Peterson ceases to be relevant or ceases to be useful, right? Like, again, like if he was just happy to say, like, yeah, you know, the capitalist system that we live under is it of course it's got strange things, and of course there's people who abuse it, and of course things are going wrong, and maybe we do need to confront those things. But you know where the best part to start on that journey of confronting these issues that we're seeing is by making your bed, and by having a shower and cleaning yourself up, and when you look in the mirror to see someone you're proud of. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely, and I understand why people respond to it, because there's not that many people who are actually trying to cheerlead for people, right? We live in a society that sort of revels in the destruction of people, right? We revel in the like, take a look at this Johnny Depp trial, which I haven't paid any attention to this Johnny Depp trial at all, because I find it to be kind of Like, who cares? It's a civil dispute between a couple. Like, you can literally see these trials every single day if you want. Like, there are trials like this that are aired all the time. There are trials like this going on constantly. Civil dispute trials. The only reason you think it matters is because you've seen Johnny Depp be Jack Sparrow. That's like literally the only thing going on. And if you don't give a fuck about that, then it's actually pretty boring, right? It's a civil dispute trial between a wife and her husband. That's all. It's so that people can be like, oh my god, did you hear what Johnny Depp said? Oh my god. And that's like the extent of it. And it's boring, and it's stupid, and it's pointless. I completely forgot why I brought this up within the context of Johnny Depp, or of Jordan Peterson. Why the fuck did I start talking about this Johnny Depp trial in the confines of Jordan Peterson? It has a lot to do with the comeuppance of the reactionary elements of the Me Too movement. I mean, if you want to get like really analytical about it, like sure, like maybe, but like it's not actually interesting to me. It really isn't. Like I'm just like, oh okay. You're telling me that celebrities have abusive relationships and struggle with, like, okay, like how normal, like how banal. Like, it's not interesting to me. And why the fuck did I start talking about that in relation to Jordan Peterson? Oh well. Like but Peterson's issue, right, is that he's taken a very hard line on defending a hierarchy that cannot defend itself any longer, right? Like, he continuously tries to defend Western civilization. He continuously attempts to try to defend the Bible, when, like, he doesn't give a shit about the Bible. He doesn't care about the negative impacts of the hierarchy that he lives in, right? Like, he doesn't give a fuck. All he knows is that he is wealthy and well off. That's it. That the hierarchy benefited him, and so he says to himself, oh, well, the hierarchy benefited me, so that must mean I did something right. As opposed to, oh, the hierarchy benefited me, so I must be the lucky one, right? I must be the one that made it through, right? The concept of any of that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, and he hangs around with dweebs like Charlie Kirk and fucking Ben Shapiro. Like, the conversation between him and Ben Shapiro was like embarrassing. It's like super cringy. Like, these guys they have no ideas. They're incredibly stupid. Like, they're defending a rotted building. Isaac, how you doing, bud? President of Mexico calls on Latin America to unite. He said that by 2050, the U.S. economy will comprise at most 4% to 10% of the world economy, and this will bring serious problems for the world. Yeah, I think that's accurate, Isaac. Like, what is it that the United States is even making? Like, what is it that it even does? Like, once the rest of the world starts to move off the dollar, once the rest of the world starts to actually focus on building their own economies and being strong in their own right, and I shouldn't say start, but like, because like China's obviously having major successes in this regard, like, the United States is just going to get blown out of the water. They're going to get completely left behind. And the only force that they're actually going to have to compete on the world stage in any way is military, right? So like, what the fuck is gonna, like, what the fuck is actually gonna happen here? You know? And you know, to touch back on Peterson and all this, like, how you know that these guys are total frauds, like, and how you know they're like total frauds, is that they're not actually interested in debating leftists. Like, the quote unquote leftists that they'll have on will be people like Russell Brand, right? Like, they'll have like the most goofy, like, off on the corner kind of stuff. But when it comes time to actually talk to the actual leftists in the conversation, like Chris Hedges, Noam Chomsky, Richard Wolff, they can't and won't, right? Why? Because they know they'll get fucking blown out of the water. Because they know that their ideology is false. They know that they're just defending it because it's benefiting them, right? It's not any different from the capitalist telling their workers, oh, the solution to all your problems is work harder. Like, yeah, obviously they're going to say that because they benefit from that. Like, that's literally as far as any of these guys have gotten. Like, well, I'm rich, and so the system works. Yeah, Russell Brand or some, not even unhinged university student, just like a regular university student, just a student who's like doesn't really know anything, doesn't really have their thoughts completely formulated, don't really understand the subject of what they're going on, right? The only person who I've actually seen who actually does allow like leftists to communicate with them in any kind of meaningful way is Steven Crowder, ironically. Like, Steven Crowder walks around university campuses and tries to dunk on kids who don't know anything, but occasionally he runs into somebody who does know things, and instead of censoring them or instead of not letting them speak, he platforms them, right? So it's, which is odd to me. Like, like, these guys are so fucking weird, man. Like, they're weirdos. They like actively work to not understand the subject and refuse to debate people who might clarify things. Like, Shapiro, in my view, is like the absolute worst version of this. These are the guys who are seizing power, by the way. Like, let's be real clear, right? Like, guys like Shapiro, Crowder, Peterson, right? These are the guys that are seizing power in the society. Like, when Donald Trump gave, oh, why am I forgetting his name? The radio guy, the big fat loser. I can't remember his name all of a sudden. But he gives him like the Medal of Freedom or the Medal of Honor or the Medal of Courage or some kind of medal, right, for civil service. The highest honor that the president can give a citizen of the nation, right? Like, that's the path these guys see for themselves. They think, like, someone like Shapiro thinks that at some point in the future he's going to get the Medal of Honor or the Medal of Freedom or whatever the fuck it was from some president at some time, because they think that they're like the patriots that are defending, you know, the whites. Rush Limbaugh, that's the guy. Rush Limbaugh and my, like, and what's so fucking slimy about Limbaugh is that I think that he was just straight up duplicitous. Like, I think that he understood that he had a voice and he had a position and he could defend it, and he understood that what he was doing was killing the project of prosperity. Like, he understood. Like, that's why he would go on, like, Family Guy, and he would go on shows, and he would allow them to lampoon the character of Rush Limbaugh, because he completely understood that it was just a grift. He completely understood. Like, that the whole goal of the Republican, and honestly the Democratic project, was to exclude huge sections of the populace from the project of prosperity. Right? Like, that's the goal here. So on this note, let's go through this article here. On December 24th, 2000, shortly before leaving office, President Bill Clinton signed the New Markets Tax Credit Program into law as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2001. He called it the most significant effort ever to help hard-pressed communities lift themselves up through private investment and entrepreneurship. Legacy-defining stuff, in other words. Or, as a new book argues, a fitting capstone to Clinton's relentless overselling of what small, market-based anti-poverty programs could do. To build support for the program's passage, Clinton had gone on a nation-spanning New Markets tour of poor places, both urban and rural. Clinton visited Appalachia, South Dakota's Pine Ridge Reservation, Chicago, East Palo Alto, rural North Carolina, and more. For stretches of these tours, he was accompanied by the civil rights activist Jesse Jackson, who twice vied for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1980s with his Rainbow Coalition of the urban and rural poor and working class. This might have looked like a rapprochement. The Democratic Leadership Council, which Clinton led prior to his presidency, had notoriously denied Jackson an invitation to its 1991 conference, and Jackson had long decried the organization as the Democrats for the leisure class. But it was more of a victory lap for the DLC. By 2000, the DLC and Clinton's vision, not just for the Democratic Party, but for the economy as a whole, had fully won. Jackson, who by this point had opened an office on Wall Street, had reoriented his civil rights activism around trying to get the financial industry to invest in dispossessed communities. The Clintonian project had prevailed. The economy was humming, and the government was running a surplus. The third way was riding high. Except in those places Clinton had decided to visit in the last days of his second term. Jackson later recalled one of the corporate leaders beside him on a dais, looking out at the crowd in Pine Ridge, saying, "I've always just seen an Indian reservations. Now I see 2 supermarkets. I see a car dealership. I see 7,000 people wearing clothes. I see a market. Where once there had merely been marginalized and impoverished people, now there was a market. That is, the potential for someone else to make profit off of those people." The New Markets Tour was meant to be a sales pitch for an anti-poverty program. The historian, Lily Geismer, presents it as instead a tour of the wreckage of Bill Clinton's presidency and a window into the blinkered ideology of his broader political movement. Her new book, Left Behind, The Democrats' Failed Attempt to Solve Inequality, should make almost any left-of-center reader retroactively furious about the 1990s and the inability of its architects to foresee the 21st century they were creating. We are in something of a golden age of both scholarly and popular histories of the conservative movement, often produced by people on the left. The reader who wishes to learn how we got from Goldwater to Trump can reach for Lisa McGear's Suburban Warriors, or comprehensive histories of post-war American conservatism by George H. Nash or Rick Perlstein. Sam Adler's Bell, co-host of Know Your Enemy, a podcast about the history of the right, has commented that left-wing historians and critics are often more interested in the history of the conservative movement and the ideas of its pivotal members than the right itself. There are fewer useful histories of how we got from Johnson to Biden, or from Humphrey to Harris. Contemporary liberalism may have fewer chroniclers, in part because it often resists easy definition as a coherent movement. Even its leading political lights will, in the United States, sometimes reject the label. Geismer has been helpfully addressing this gap. Her previous book, Don't Blame Us, traced the political evolution of suburban liberals in the second half of the 20th century by making a case study of the high-tech corridor along Route 128 outside Boston. That book, focusing often on specific and sometimes obscure political campaigns and battles in one geographic area, is illuminating, but perhaps a harder sell for a general audience than Left Behind, which offers a broader political history of U.S. domestic policy in the 1990s. Populated by a cast of characters a reader alive in that era has likely already heard of, not to overstate the Beach Read appeal of a book that assumes you might like to know how enterprise zones got rebranded as empowerment zones, though speaking for myself, I did. Despite its focus on poverty policy, Left Behind is a book about winners. Other histories of democratic policies that include this era, like Ryan Grimm's We've Got People, focus on the internal political battles for power in the Democratic Party. Geismer's work is about the people who emerged triumphant from those battles. It's about the dog that caught the car, if the car was a large base of suburban professional class support, and the dog was Al from the men. Geismer makes clear that they were nearly all men who wanted to transform the party largely got what they wanted, and were given opportunities to put their preferred ideas into action again and again. Left Behind asks that we judge these winners not by their political victories, but by whether their ideas actually worked in practice. The judgment is not kind. The crew that would come to take over the Democratic Party organized themselves in the 1980s around the idea that the party had become discredited among the public because it was in thrall to its more liberal elements. These New Democrats gravitated towards Gary Hart, who unsuccessfully ran for the Democratic Party nomination in 1984, positioned as the candidate of new ideas against Walter Mondale, ostensibly the embodiment of a stale Great Society liberalism. Hart, along with allies like Representative Tim Wirth, articulated that Geismer calls large generational skepticism with large institutions and bureaucracy. In practice, large institutions tended to mean unions and government agencies. The New Democrats were similarly allergic to transactional politics and special interest groups, which Geismer helpfully defines as African Americans, women, white farmers, and especially organized labor. Even by the mid-1980s, Jesse Jackson could correctly note that this definition of special interests happened to define them as the Democratic Party's actual base of support, or, as he put it, members of our family. Hart was notably more popular with white pundits than with black primary voters. But what the New Democrats truly wanted, and truly believed their policy agenda would win, was the white suburban vote. In the wake of Ronald Reagan's re-election in 1985, the political strategist Al Frum founded the Democratic Leadership Council with an inaugural membership of 41 people, including 14 senators and 17 representatives. Of that group, 2 members were non-white and none were women. The philosophy of the DLC, shaped by early members like Frum, the political consultant David Osborne, and Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton, was to go after the aspiring middle, electorate in suburbia, rather than the working class and dispossessed, and to appeal to it with an agenda that stressed economic dynamism, free trade, embrace of the tech industry, and, vitally, the destruction of the welfare state. This gets to the central tension in New Democrat thought. Seemingly at no point can anyone conclusively decide if their policy agenda is meant to be politically effective, to win over white suburbanites, or to implement successful policy, which in this case would mean reforming welfare in a way that would leave poor people better off. Once Bill Clinton was in power, actual welfare reform, the destruction of the New Deal era aid to families with the Dependent Children Assistance Program, was passed largely because End Welfare as We Know It was a Clinton campaign trail promise, and Bruce Reed of the White House Domestic Policy Council had come to believe that phrase, which he had taped up in his office, had been vital to Clinton's 1992 victory. Clinton, then running for re-election, was comfortably ahead in the polls when he signed the welfare reform bill. His political advisor Dick Morris had urged him to sign it as insurance. This reflects, on one hand, a chilling pattern of cynicism about the effect of domestic policy on actual people, and, on the other, a genuinely naive faith that the market would simply take care of everyone if unleashed to do so. Geismar mainly avoids the useful but oft-abused term neoliberalism when describing the New Democrats' ideology, and instead focuses on their ethos of doing well by doing good. Unlike an early liberal consensus around doing well and doing good, that is, growing the economy and providing for the downtrodden at the same time, doing well by doing good is a belief that there is no trade-off between making money and improving the world, and in fact that making a lot of money is the best and most effective way to improve the world. It was an unusually durable belief, even when Clinton's brain trust found no evidence that was likely to happen. They would simply point to the political efficacy of saying it would. Well, most of them would. The book might be subtitled The Betrayal of Robert Reich. The Economist, an early and influential New Democrat thinker, pops up throughout Left Behind. In Geismar's account, he spent the 1970s and 80s arguing for a faster, government-directed transition to a tech and service economy, and spent part of the 1990s as Clinton's labor secretary, often trying to make the administration's reforms and proposals marginally fairer and more generous, only to be foiled at basically every opportunity. At one point, Reich was forced to stop using the term corporate welfare in public. Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin thought it might spook the markets. Reich quit the administration shortly after Clinton's 1996 re-election. Largely, except for his example, Left Behind shows us, over and over again, officials coming up with solutions to problems that might work in theory, implementing diminished versions of them, and calling it a great success. The patented third way policy development process was identifying a problem in some public good, attributing the problem to an old-fashioned big government liberalism, seizing on a market-friendly alternative without ever stopping to consider whether that alternative could work at scale, and finally, replacing the flawed programs with inadequate half measures while promising that it was now solved forever. This pattern shows up most clearly in one of the book's strongest and most infuriating chapters, on the Clinton administration's housing policy. Early on, the Clinton administration signaled that its approach to public housing would be to dismantle it as it then existed. American public housing, characterized by corrupt or incompetent housing agencies and heavily segregated massive housing complexes, was seen as an emblematic failure of big government liberalism. The Clinton administration's approach was to eliminate much existing public housing and voucherize federal housing support rather than directly provide housing. What that housing policy failed to consider is that humans lived in the homes and neighborhoods in question, which were now being demolished. The new urbanism-inspired policy on public housing was something like this. Step 1. Make the housing and the neighborhoods it is in more pleasant. Great. Step 2. Subject it to market forces. Okay. Step 3. Provide much less housing than you're removing, ? In the process of reinventing public housing, the Department of Housing and Urban Development urged Congress to repeal a rule that required it to replace 1 unit of housing for every unit it destroyed. The agency went on to replace existing housing projects in cities like Chicago with significantly less dense developments, with room for far fewer families. If you can see how that might lead to an urban housing crisis, then congratulations. You're smarter than nearly every Democratic housing policy wonk of the 1990s. The ostensible goal in providing less housing overall was to let the market do the work of integrating cities like Chicago. But HUD's voucher program, Geismer argues, assumed that people would have no reason to desire to stay in the areas where they lived, would not face discrimination in more affluent housing markets, and would be able to move into safe and thriving middle-class communities. In reality, in part, because the politicians simply didn't put protections in place at the federal level, landlords nationwide routinely discriminate against people attempting to use vouchers to access housing. Thus, the sublime technocratic idea that a lot of mixed-income new urbanist development would be superior to traditional superblocks, a perfectly defensible one, became, after going through the third way policy wood chipper, the reality of mass displacement and inadequate housing support for the poor and working class. The housing debacle also drives home the maddening ignorance and exceptionalism of U.S. policymaking, which never stops to ask if competing ideas about housing, healthcare, industrial policy, transportation might be imported from abroad. Seemingly at no point did anyone tasked with fixing public housing in U.S. cities stop to ask if perhaps Vienna or Tokyo might have any helpful answers. Left Behind should spur serious soul-searching among the American center-left. It is a book about well-intentioned policy not working out, but also about blasé indifference of policymakers as to whether their policies worked or not, and whether the point was for them to work for the people affected by policy or for ideas to work in a speech. The New Democrats offered credit instead of welfare, vouchers instead of housing, and charter schools instead of integrated and equitably funded schools. All of those programs were also ways to use the seemingly neutral language and techniques of the market to impose meritocratic middle-class norms on people of color living in distressed communities. Clintonites were convinced of their altruism while designing and selling their plans with undisguised nasty paternalism, and it seems they never decided if, or came to an agreement on whether their program was a genuine effort to address America's problems or a political exercise in winning a political base. We can still see in practice how the belief in growth as the strongest driver of positive outcomes, combined with a fierce ideological resistance to handouts, leads inexorably and consistently to the foreclosing of most anti-poverty action. The pattern by which Democratic policy proposals get watered down remains consistent. Joe Biden's progressive domestic policy agenda stalled out last year in large part because Senator Christian Sinema opposed the pay-fors tax increase largely on corporations, and Senator Joe Manchin, born 1947, opposed the economic programs for pay-fors pay-for. Geismer makes the case that the Clinton administration was, on the domestic front, even more catastrophic than we recall. If I remember Clinton as someone with basically no positive record, she describes an administration that could only get away with being so destructive because it believed fervently that it was doing the best it could. The new markets tax credit program Clinton signed into law a month before leaving office, the most significant effort ever to help hard-pressed communities, has, between inception decades ago and 2016, supported more than 5,300 projects in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico, according to the Tax Policy Center. The very same day Clinton created that program, he also signed the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, a piece of legislation that deregulated derivatives trading and also contributed directly to the global financial crisis a few years later. The New Democrats successfully created new markets. Instead of helping people, they put the entire globe at their mercy. And the results of this are fairly obvious, right? That the Bush administration was an extension of this, and then subsequently so was the Obama administration. That there was a general consensus amongst the ruling class that the way to operate was with the quote-unquote free market. And as Demand Better says, good to see you, bud, screw neoliberalism, without a doubt. Without a doubt. The idea that the market will decide, the market will decide. It'll decide to impoverish huge sections of the populace. It'll decide to abandon everybody and really empower the most cruel people in the society. That's how we end up with Doug Ford, right? Just get a job, disabled people. Just get a job, people who by definition can't work. Just get a job, right? Like, that's fine. Yep. Canada went down the same neoliberal, liberal path with the Chrétien and Martin years. Absolutely. Yeah, the market will decide, right? Like, we don't need to actually have a plan or an idea, right? Normies have been told for decades that the media is biased to the left. When it is LibCon owned and operated, the left cannot succeed while most people accept such biased framing. Well, and also, like, the idea that the liberals are a left-wing party, right? Like, that there's this idea that the liberals, like, near as I can tell, they're a pretty far-right party. Like, Justin Trudeau is outright scapegoating immigrants now. Like, do we actually need to see them, like, doing the salutes? Like, what do we need? Like, Trudeau came out in blackface already. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, so we part of the reason why we are in, like, a post-truth environment is because of these massive, overwhelming failures. It's a type of Dadaism, right? Where people are just following their guts and following their feelings because they don't actually believe anything they're told anymore, right? So we're in a real, like, boy cried wolf moment where, like, even if we tell the truth, or even if the establishment tells the truth, there's huge sections of the populace that go, nah, right? That's what happens during the anti-vax period. That's where you get this anti-vax movement, because you have a huge section of the populace that's just like, wait a minute, all you guys have done to us is lie, and now all of a sudden you're telling us the truth? I don't think so. What, inject this thing in my body? No thank you, right? Makes total sense to me, right? Makes total sense to me that these guys would exist, right? One thing that I keep noticing over and over and over again is that the right denies that we live under neoliberalism. I mean, do you have a clear example of that? I mean, the right generally doesn't understand these things. Like, if I wanted to, like, be really, like, the right doesn't really have much by way of theory, right? That's how they end up with, like, just bootstrap and individualism, entrepreneurship, right? Like, because it's all just slogans, right? They don't actually have a theory. Like this is what I think is so important to understand about the right. It's like that it's less that they deny that we live under neoliberalism and more that they just don't understand the subject, right? Like that's why these, like, our entire democratic system is not really, like, it's a popularity contest. That's all it is, right? Imagine, like, the popularity contest that you had at your, like, high school for, like, prom king and prom queen, except at the end the prom king and the prom queen got to write laws, right? Like, that's our society. Like, that's our culture. And so it doesn't matter if you're intelligent or you understand how the economy works, and this article pointed it out many times, right? It doesn't matter if your policies work. It just matters if you can sell them. Like, it just matters if you can get votes, right? The left that is accepted in the corporate media is essentially radical liberalism, or better, the pseudo left. I mean, the only left I've ever seen in corporate media is like outside of, like, the identity politics stuff, is pretty much just like an actor who has a view that we could do something to help people. Like, that's kind of it. Oh yeah, they do have a theory. It's just terrible for the mass populace. Ayn Rand, Milton Friedman, Austria's school. Yeah, just like the best way to build a society is to destroy the society, right? Like, that's all these guys ever said, right? The best way to build a functioning society is to destroy the society, right? Is to say things like there is no such thing as society, which I can't imagine a more radical position than to deny the existence of a society. Like, obviously there is such a thing as a society, even though it's kind of an abstract idea, right? Like, the same people who are saying society doesn't exist, but money does, right? Like, that's what's so hilarious. Society doesn't exist, but money does, right? So, like, we can believe in this abstraction and this sort of thing that doesn't actually exist, but the idea that groups of people create things called communities that are in fact a society, well, that doesn't exist. No, it's just individuals individualizing their individualism. There's no such thing as structures. There's no such thing as there's no such thing as, like, systemic anything, right? None of that exists. It's just individuals individualizing their individualism, right? Like, this is my favorite thing about the people who deny the existence of, like, systemic anything. It's like, what do you think laws are, dude? Like, what do you think a law is, right? Like, forget about systemic racism, right? Just, like, systemic. Like, what do you think a law is? It's a system that persists in your society until the group of individuals come together and repeal it, right? Like, it's the denial of systems themselves that is so terrifying. Like, just like, literally imagine you are on a boat, like a big yacht, let's say, and you pick the captain based on a popular election, right? And and so there's an election going on, and so you're voting for your new captain, and the guy that gets all the votes, he's a real, like, party animal, does a bunch of coke, right? Like, people really love him. He's like a Chris Farley fat ass stupid moron, but he wants to be the leader, and everybody's like, haha, he's so great. And the captain that's currently driving the ship around is a real hard ass dickhead that everyone hates, and so they want to get rid of him. And they vote this, and everybody votes for this guy. And once he gets into office, the party animal guy that they all just voted for, he's walking around saying things like, "Yeah, ships don't have engines. What are you talking about? Ha ha! Everybody just party all the time, right? The market will decide." Like, you wouldn't accept that for a guy driving a ship, and yet if you have somebody who drives a fucking entire culture and society, yeah, over the market. The market will do it. Oh yeah, Murray Rothbard, the right-wing libertarian, heterodox economist, is the ultimate spewer of this individual freedom nonsense. Like, the more I think on this idea of individual freedom, like, the more I really do see that it is just childish. Like, really. That it comes down to just, like, a childish, like, a responsible adult will work to take responsibility for their family and their community. That's what responsible adults do. But what we're being told by these frauds on the right is that personal responsibility means only caring about your own individual self, right? That it doesn't extend to your to securing your own family, and it doesn't extend to having a community that's working out at all, right? Like, so it's childish. It's just outright something that a 5-year-old would say, right? That it's extremely infantile, like the just like babyish, like really, like not just like wrong, but just like you've got to kind of just be a baby to actually think it would work this way, and to actually believe that it does work this way, right? Like, to deny the systems around you, to deny the natural systems, to deny the work and effort of everybody that went before you, right? Like, you're literally driving on a road you didn't build or even contribute in the building of, right? The road is just there. It was built 100 years ago by other people, right? But all you got to do is care about yourself, right? It's infantile. Like, it's uh-oh. Fight. I get really skeptical of this argument that's about to happen between you, Watson and Eric, because I often find that there's a miscommunication about what's being said when we use the word libertarian. This is why I hate the word libertarian. It's why I don't like that there are leftists who are trying to adopt the word libertarian, because it's confusing. That's all, right? That the word libertarian means a bunch of different shit. Like, it just means a bunch of different shit to everybody, right? And so, like, you can say left libertarian and you mean this, but we hear this, right? And so it creates a semantic misunderstanding that always takes about an hour to resolve, right? Just to get on the same page. And it's so cumbersome and difficult to communicate basic ideas because of the usage of this word libertarian that I don't know why people do it. Like, I don't know why people do it. Like, what is it about this word libertarian? Like, what is it about this word that we're just clinging on to it with such fervor when all it seems to do is complicate the conversation? It really is the case. That, like, if what you're saying is anarchism, say you're an anarchist. Like, if that's what you're actually at, then do that, right? Like, I don't really understand, like, because and this seems to be like Murray Rothbard did this on purpose, right? In Europe, libertarian means something completely different, right? Whereas here in America, especially throughout the American South, it means like personal individual responsibility. Whereas in Europe, it means, like, yeah, liberty for the individual, but also for the collective. Like, it's annoying. It's annoying as shit. Ugh. The U.S. can't make enough fuel. And there's no fix in sight. Oh my God, guys. This completely predictable thing that 100% was definitely going to happen. Right? This completely predictable thing that's 100% going to happen, right? The decline of fossil fuels, right? We hit peak oil. We're on the decline now, right? And the Americans literally don't have a plan for it. Like, they've had like 100 years of being like, well, we're going to run out of this. No plan. From the record gasoline prices to higher airfares to fears of diesel rationing ahead, America's runaway energy market is disquieting both U.S. travelers and the wider economy. But the chief driver isn't high crude prices or even the rebound in demand. It's simply too few refineries turning oil into usable fuel, right? Like, I love it, man. I love reading these articles because it's always like, the issue isn't that we're running out of oil. Like, we didn't run peak oil and we're going to definitely run out of it. The issue is that we're not polluting and destroying the planet enough. That's the issue. More than 1 billion barrels a day of the country's oil refining capacity, or about 5% overall, has shut since the beginning of the pandemic. Elsewhere in the world, capacity has shrunk by 2.13 million additional barrels a day. Energy consultancy Turning Mason and Company estimates. And with no plans to bring new U.S. plants online, even though refiners are reaping record profits, the supply squeeze is only going to get worse. Like, of course the refiners are reaping record profits, right? When supply goes down, but demand remains stable, price goes up, right? Like, do these guys even hire economists? Like, we're on the razor's edge, said John Hours, executive vice president at Turner Mason Co. in Dallas. We're ripe for a potential supply crisis. Of course you are. We're running out of oil. Literally. Like, that's literally happening. The dearth of refining capacity has dire implications for both U.S. consumers and global markets, especially as we do nothing about it. At home, retail gasoline prices are continuing to hit new records, exacerbating some of the worst inflation American households have ever seen. Meanwhile, the East Coast is on the brink of a diesel shortage that risks crippling already strained supply chains that have disrupted the flow of everything from grocery staples to construction supplies in the last 2 years, which is why we're continuing to do nothing about it. The factors fueling the refining shortage won't surprise anyone. With demand for gasoline and jet fuel practically vanishing versus the height of the pandemic, companies closed some of their least profitable crude processing plants permanently. I mean, one assumes that some of these plants were being shuttered because they're literally destroying the planet. Like, literally, right? Like, there does come a point where I think somebody has to go, do I actually give a shit about my kids? Some of those plants have been affected by fires, explosions, and hurricanes that were too expensive to fix, especially because eventual transition towards cleaner energy makes their long-term business model unprofitable and makes them less attractive to buyers. By the end of 2023, as much as 1.69 million barrels of U.S. capacity is targeted for closure, compared to 2019 levels. Like, I love that they're reporting this as if it's like, well, this is terrible. This should be reported as a total victory. Like, oh, we're producing less oil, we're doing less, we're polluting less, we're being less shitty, right? At the same time American refining shrinks, the war in Ukraine has made the global divergence between supply and demand even more acute, because we had infinite money for war, right? With the country shunning Russian fuel exports in the wake of the war, the U.S. is now supplying more of the world's fuel with an ever-shrinking fleet of plants. Just, like, fuck off, man. You know? You just fuck off. Like, I just am exhausted with these idiots. Like, and it is. It's just getting to be stupid. Like, it's just getting to be fucking stupid at this point. Like, we're in the midst of a climate catastrophe. Biden is sending troops to Somalia. Here we go, right? Nothing more like expanding the war, right? Got to make sure that we get boots on the ground in fucking Somalia, of all fucking places, right? Like, and ultimately it'll be Ethiopia, right? That's the goal, right? Like, are we the baddies, do you think? Semantic misunderstandings are what the left is best at. Yeah, I like anarchism because all hierarchies should be justified to exist. Yeah. Like, the fundamental who do those authors work for? I know, right? Like for real. You find out that they work for, like, the oil company is what you find out. Like, it's Bloomberg, right? Like, it's, I don't know. Fuck these guys, dude. Like, the idea that, like, oh, hey, yeah, we're running out of fuel, we should probably transition to an economy that doesn't rely on this non-renewable resource that we're burning. Like, nope, doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. Well, I don't want to open a can of worms with only 5 minutes left on the clock, but, like, to me, this statement that anarchism says, right, is all hierarchies should be justified to exist. I feel like that's completely non-controversial, right? Like, but it does seem to be Bloomberg got it, you bet. it does seem to be like the centralized, like, what's the linchpin that we're actually having a debate about in the world, even though nobody actually calls it this, is that you have groups of people, and these are like your Petersonians, like your liberals and conservatives and NDPers, who assume that the hierarchy is justified and are telling you to justify yourself, right? That's the get a job crowd, that you have to justify yourself to the hierarchy. Whereas I think the leftists generally, like, it's not just the anarchists, are saying, no, the hierarchy has to justify itself. And if the hierarchy has to justify itself, then we need to overthrow it. The point of contention that exists between the anarchists and the communists is that the anarchists espouse an idea that we can do away with the state like this, whereas the communists believe that you need to transition, that the state can't simply be done away with, that we need to take control of it and transition in that direction. And I am actually of the opinion that you can never be done with the state. That the state represents something more than the state. Yeah, the issue is how we get from here to there. And I don't believe you ever can be done away with the idea of the state. That the state is itself an abstraction that exists within our consciousness. And if you were to, like, I actually think it would be quite dangerous for, I think it would actually be quite dangerous for a society to claim they had done away with the state, because the state is always where the center of power exists. And there's always going to be some place where we come and make decisions together. And those decisions are going to be enforced, right? There's always going to be some kind of group who is responsible for the enforcement of the ideals of the society. I just don't think you get away with, like, how do you get away with this? Yeah, of course. No, it's a contentious point, right? It's a contentious point. Everybody disagrees with it, right? And it's not controversial, but who knows? That's what anarchism often means. I think you're right. It's flipped, so we have to justify ourselves to the hierarchy. Well put. Well, thank you. But it's true, and this is what I think we should be saying to these libertarian types, right? And we should cut right to it, because I do think that that's the linchpin of the entire argument, right? Because they acknowledge the existence of the hierarchies, right? Peterson talks about the hierarchies all the time, right? Like, these guys talk about the hierarchies. They understand the hierarchies. They just think that the hierarchies are justified, right? And their insistence is that you justify yourself to the hierarchy. And we shouldn't at all. We don't need to justify ourselves to the hierarchy, right? We are justified by a much larger power than these hierarchies that exist, right? We are spawned in by natural forces. We don't need to justify ourselves to any hierarchy. It's the opposite. The hierarchies need to justify themselves to us, and if they can't, they should be dismantled. And what we're finding in this society, there is no justifiable hierarchy. All of the hierarchies are illegitimate in this society. And how do I know that's the case? Because they're abandoning us in huge ways, right? Like, this society doesn't even provide food and shelter for its people. Like, embarrassing. The state's various hierarchies must be justified and reasonable, but getting rid of the state just leaves a void for reactionary institutions to fill. Yeah, that's always been my position. Like, if you were to try to get rid of the state, well, corporations will just take over, and you'll just end up with, like, a feudal situation, right? Where, like, the corporations own all the power, they own all the institutions, they own all the wealth, right? Like, and I just don't think it's as clean cut as all of this. I think a better way to describe this is the arbitrary political borders. All right. Well, this seems as fine a time to close down the stream as any, guys. I gotta tell you guys, I've been having like a lot of imposter syndrome recently. I've been having a lot of just this feeling of like, oh my god, like I'm just some schlub, like I'm just this. But I'm so happy to talk to you guys. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you come in, and we can have these conversations. We can try to build this power. Like, more importantly, like just getting these ideas into that quote unquote marketplace of ideas, right? Just getting these thoughts and letting them be heard, right? Like letting them get, like, to me the most dangerous thing that's happening in the society is that the leftists are being chased out of it. That the reasonable or like the reasonable solutions that come out of the left are just being silenced, and all that's being allowed to be heard are just ideas from people's whose ideology has already failed. It's very scary. And so well, here's a good time. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. The billionaire class is spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes that you won't realize it, and you'll just stay the good little little commodity that they need you to be. Rebel, revolt, repent. Good luck. We're gonna need it.